Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the School Manager Part 12. In this training, I'm going to show you how you can create this amazing day view scheduler complete with drag and drop scheduling. We're going to show you how you can automatically change the views based on room or teacher type simply by making a quick change. I'm also going to show you how to expand certain classes. All we need to do is just drag them down and it's going to expand the class time. Refreshing is going to show that updated time. We're also going to show you how to make changes based on selection of a specific class and display those students. We've got so much to cover in this part 12. I can't wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much. We've got so much to cover this week. I really appreciate you joining me here. Again, we're focused on part 12 of the day view scheduler. That's right, we're going to be showing drag and drop scheduling. All we need to do is just drag and drop any cell. I'm going to show you automatically expand classes. So it's going to be a dynamic showing all the details and then automatically shrinking them. We are also going to be able to change the view. So all we need to do again is selection. We can sort by teacher. We can sort by room, even class type. We can sort it automatically by just on refresh. And the same, we've got selection. So we're going to show the date, the room, the time. We can also make changes here to the room, or the teacher automatically will update it. So if we select teacher here and we want to of course change that teacher here, we can show by teacher and then easily just select it and switch a teacher. We can just change it by teacher. It's going to change that teacher automatically and show that updated teacher. If we want to expand the details, we can just click here. It's going to expand and automatically shrink up. It's going to be a dynamic expansion based on the text. So it's going to show all the text. Some will expand a little bit, some will expand a lot based on that. We're going to show you how to put icons here, adding those icons, and of course drag and drop scheduling. So if we want to change the time, we can just change the time here. If we also want to increase the time, maybe we want to start it, we can just do it here. We can increase the time and it's going to do just like that automatically. Refreshing that will update those icons. And we've got a lot to cover in this training, so we're going to get started right away on this. I do appreciate you sticking with me. All I ask is just a few things. If you can, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and don't forget to click on the notification icon bell. And that'll ensure that you get these trainings sent right to you, either with email or notification, when I complete these each and every Tuesday. This is the School Manager series. These applications are absolutely free. All you need to do is click on the links in the description, either with your email or Facebook Messenger, and we're going to get that sent over right to you. If you do like these trainings, I've got 175 of them available for you for just $66, and that'll help us out. That's going to be just 37 cents a piece, and we're going to send a huge pack of them. I've also got a brand new announcement. I am super happy. You guys know about my mentorship program. If not, this mentorship program, I'm going to show you how to define, design, develop, and deploy your own Excel applications for passive income. But a lot of you have been hesitant to join because I know it's a big task. So I decided to make an incredible promotion. So for just $7, that's right, $7, you can now join the mentorship program. And what that'll do is that'll ensure you get the first 5 weeks. That's almost 8 hours of training for just $7. I don't know how long I'm going to keep this open, but go ahead and click the link below. I'll include the description out for this promotion. That's $7 just to get 5 weeks. And of course, there's no obligation to continue. If you want to continue, fantastic. If not, I'm really happy to share those 5 weeks and almost 8 hours of training. It's an incredible deal. It's not going to stick around long, so make sure you go ahead and click the link down below. I wanted to make sure to get that to you. All right, let's get started on the training because we have so much to cover on this. This is the sample one, so we're going to close this out and we're going to get started. This is what we're going to be looking toward, and we're going to take off right where we left off next week. So I'm going to save any changes that I might have made here in this sample. We're going to close this out and we're going to go into this one. Now you notice it looks a lot different, so we do have a lot of work to complete. A few items on last week. On last week we had a few changes that we need to make, and there were some changes that I needed to make right away on that. So the first thing was that this class title here, I wanted to make sure that this was dynamic. I think I just put some text in there. So class name, just something temporarily. I updated that, just updated that. based on the index of the class name. To get that row, we did B8, whatever in B8, that's the class database row. And so that's going to give us an updated name automatically as we load them. It's going to make sure that they all have. And also there was some text here, and the text was, each lesson was the same, and that was part of the macro. So I'm going to go into that macro and just show you a quick update, and that was done already. So let's take a quick look at that inside the application. All right, we're going to go into the schedule day view here. So this is the day view refresh that we started working on. We've got some work to do on this. One of the most important things is I wanted to clear out the text. Now notice, if you remember correctly, if not, no problem, we built this text, right? We built this lesson text based on what we wanted to show here inside this settings here, right? So all the settings we want to build out, whether it's a data label. So we're building out all this class information into a single text string, and that text screen is going to appear in here. But we need to make sure as we loop through all the lessons in our results here, we're looping through everything that comes through, both, for here on May 1st, all those lessons. But what we want to do is we want to make sure we clear out the text. So as we loop through these lessons right here, we're starting our loop right up here for the application. So here, this is the columns here, and this is the loop teacher row. And here we go, last result row. This is the one we're talking about, results. So before we get to the next result row, we must clear out the text, clear out that. And so I just added that, and we want to make sure we clear it out before we start building a new one again, so they don't build on top of each other. Okay, so I wanted to cover that. That was just some fix-ups we did from last week. So if you notice that, we just added that in. Everything else we're doing from scratch here. We're going to be making some updates to the lesson database here. In fact, I'm going to be updating this, and I want to update this also. I want to make on the scheduling screen, I want to make an update to here. What I want to do is I want to have the date. Now, while we have just a single date on this day view, when we add week view and month view, we're going to need to show and possibly change the date. So let's go ahead and make the update here. I want to update this. We don't necessarily need this header here. And so I'm going to unmerge these, and I would like to put the date in here. I think that's going to be really nice and helpful. And then we can make a change to the date here. So all we need to do is just delete this, and then we don't necessarily need that. I'm going to bring this down here, and I'm going to merge and center this and left, and then I'm going to give it that white color here. So basically I want the long date to show in here. I'm going to show long date here. So 5/1, whatever it is, I want Saturday, May 1st to show up here. I want the room to show up here. I want, again, here we have to add some drop down lists here. We also have to add some drop down lists. Here is going to be the time, and here's going to be the duration. So we've already created those named ranges. So why don't we add that data validation in right now? So we're going to go into list. We want to list, and I believe it is times, but let's use F3 and double check that for that named range. And we go into times right here, clicking on that, okay, and then click okay. And we also have durations here. So we're going to add that data validation. We want to have a list of durations so that we can then update that. F3 to double check that. Click on durations here. We have it here. Click OK. And okay, so basically we want to set the duration here, so whatever it is. And we also want to set the start time here. Again, also we want the times here. So again, for the teacher, we want to be able to set the teacher specific start times and end times. So again, we're going to do equals times, and that's the named range for the time. So we can set that up. So now we have drop down lists, so we can set the teacher start and end times here. Okay, there's a blank here. I want to show you what that is, and let's remove that. So we're going to go into the admin here and take a look at that. Now notice that we have all the way down here, we have, why is this not showing up? It's 12 a.m. It looks correct. But take a look in here. If we look in the options, which is what we want, in the advanced, scrolling down, we're hiding show with 0 cells that have 0 value. So this has a 0 value. So how can we change that? All we need to do is just update a second here, change it to a second, and it's going to show it. We're not showing seconds. So basically 0 values, which is also 12 a.m. is not going to show. Okay, so we're going to save that. And so that's how we solve that little issue there. So we can now go back into the schedule, and now we're going to show, we do show 12 a.m. All right, perfect. So we've got exams and students here, and then we have attendance here. So what I want to do now that we've got this, and I like the way that it looks now, I want to make some updates. I want to finish this up here, and I also want to make sure, so notice we have teacher times here, start time and end time, but if we have teacher time, start and end time, we want to save this along with the specific lesson. In other words, we have class information like class subject and class type. Those won't change, but there are certain things that will change with a specific lesson. A room could change, a teacher could change, a date could change. So also the teacher start and end times, we want those specific for every lesson. So we're going to add that onto the lesson database right here. So notice that we have all the way down here in the lesson database, we have this information. So what I would like to do is just bring this all over and add in. So I'm just going to delete. I don't want to disturb too much. So I'm going to delete here 2 empty columns here, and then I'm going to insert 2 empty columns here. So I'm going to insert here a column, and then I'll do one more time, insert a column, and I'm going to call this teacher start, and we'll update the code accordingly. We just have to update some, let's say start, and then teacher end, okay, because I want those times to be tracked there. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to make a quick update here. This previously was, of course, P. It ended on P, so we need to make the updates to the data validation. And also we have now here, nothing's going to be disturbed here after this, but the criteria is now going to go. Let's bring this criteria over a bit because we may want to add some stuff in the future. So we can drag that over to, let's say, W and X. Let's bring it over here and bring it over here. So that way we have more space to work with. So I'm going to bring it there. And now we just need to update. Let's go ahead and make the updates to the named ranges here. Otherwise, we're going to get an error. And if we run that, we're going to see right away we'll get the error. And that'll instruct us also where to make those updates. So I've also, one more thing, I added the day view refresh to this button here. If we right click on here and assign macro, I just added this macro day view. It's easier to refresh the data when we click that. So I just added that. Okay, we're going to get that bug, which we said, because we know we're making the changes, right? We know we have an advanced filter here. And we know we just made some changes. So that's a quick way to tell us where we made those changes. Lesson database, right, now goes to column R. And we also have to update those formulas that we did, right? The formula is now in N through R. So first thing we know, our advanced filter is no longer in P. It comes to R. Our criteria range, that this is fine for BA, and that's going to be this fine. That doesn't change for this particular one. But also we want to copy the formulas previously on L1. We now want to copy those formulas. They're going to be in N through R, N through R. And also we want to paste those again through N through R. Okay, good. So we've got that. There's going to be a few other updates that we need to make as well, but those are going to be on the class ID and class criteria. So we can run that now. So that's working fine. That brings down the formulas just the way we want it. And we'll go into classes, right? And this is where we're going to have the issue. So let's take a look inside. Previously, if we look inside our database here, our lesson database, previously it was ended in it was R. So let's go back into our code and take a look at the R and just make the updates there on our code. So it's going to be class list. Here we go into classes macros here. We look for the particular, let's bring this up here based on the lesson database. So we're locating the lesson database for specific classes because we have that, not class list, not icon list. So all the way down here onto load lessons. Here we go. Q, previously we ended up on Q and our criteria was RS through R2, right? So now we're not going to end up on Q. We're going to bring it all the way to S. Actually, I'm going to bring it to one column over because we need a blank. And the criteria is no longer R2 through S2. It is now W through X. So we're going to make that update. There's another instance that we have to make that update, W through X. Our results haven't changed. They're still going to be on AA. Remember, we deleted 2 columns. If we unhide this, just double check, unhide, we see our results still coming in AA. That's what I want. So that's fine. No change there. And I'm going to undo that because we don't need to see that anymore. So let's take a quick look over here to make sure we have everything up here. Creating the lessons, looking good. Okay, very good. Here's another one. So again, I want to update this. Again, making this to S, right? This is on the lessons database, updating the lessons. And the criteria in this case, again, is going to be W through X. So we need to make those 2 updates, and now we're good to go on that. And we're going to run this. Let's go ahead and run those macros to make sure that we don't have any issues. So we got classes. We're going to load the classes to see if we're loading the classes. The scheduled lessons are coming in just fine here with no issue. All right, good. So we've updated the lesson database here. We've got our criteria in here. We've got our new formulas, and we got our brand new columns, teacher start and teacher end. Good, because I want to save those in here in classes. Okay, so now what next? What is the next thing we want to do? Well, there's a lot we're going to do, but first what I want to do is finish that macro that we worked on last time. Remember, we left a few things out, so I want to finish that up. Here inside, that's going to be the scheduled day view. So we're going to look in the schedule miscellaneous, or schedule actually day view here. This is the one we're going to put our focus on here, day view. Why is that? Because we left a few things out. Notice we have, what do we do if there's rooms, or what if we do if it's class type? So let's take a look at that. We left that out purposely because we were just focused on teacher last time. So let's go ahead and fix that. Okay, so as we add teachers, rooms, or types to this header, what I also want to do is I want to hide, if we're not using all of this, we should hide it, right? So I want to keep track of the last column. What is the last column? If I add all of these columns, I want to know the last one added, so then I'm just going to hide the rest. So let's put that into a variable so we can keep track of the last column and then hide everything. So I'm going to do just that up here. So I'm just going to create a new row here for the dimension. Dimension the last, we'll call it column as long, and we'll probably add a few more to that. Okay, so for the teachers, right? So as we go for the teachers, we're keeping track of the schedule column here, and the schedule column is going to increase and increase and increase, right? So as we complete that, I want to set the last column is going to be equal to the schedule column, in this case -1. Why do I want to subtract 1? Because we're keeping track of this time, right? So I want to know if there's nothing here, then we're going to have to subtract 1, because this is the last one I want to show. I want to show this. So this column is the last one. I don't want to show this. So as we add to, I'm going to be subtracting this. I want to subtract 1 so I know the last column, because we don't want to add that. Okay, so we're subtracting 1. Set the last column, hide all others. And we're going to do the same thing for this rooms and the class type. So we're going to keep track of that. Okay, so if the view by rooms, then what do we want to do? First of all, I want to make sure that we actually have rooms. Right? If we're set the view by rooms, but the user hasn't created any rooms at all here, that's going to be a problem. So the first thing we're going to do is determine the last row. And if that last row is less than 9, then we need to let the user know there are no rooms. So you might want to add some rooms before viewing by the rooms. So we're going to do just that inside the code. So first we're going to determine the last row of those rooms. So let's set that last row. So the last row, we're going to call this last room row. Make sure we have a variable on that. I'm just going to put those in lowercase, last room row. And then if I go down and those change to capitals, then I know we've got a variable on that. Okay, so we've got that variable right. So admin, right, dot range. What is that range? It's going to be based on AL. That's where our rooms are located, AL. And then we'll just use a large column here. And then we'll go to 28. Why 28? Well, let's take a look back inside that admin. And probably, let's say the last one, 28. So I'm going to add, you can add more rooms, but that's sufficient for our purposes. That'll give us 19 or 20 rooms here, and it's sufficient. And so what we'll do is we'll say last room is 28, AL is our column. Then we're going to do AN on class type, very, very similar on that. So AL, in this case, 28, dot end, XLUP, dot row, last room row. If the last room row is less than 9, then message box, we need to let the user know to, hey, you know what, please make sure to add rooms within the admin screen before selecting this view. And then keep in mind here that let's see, do we stop calculations up here? Not yet, but I'm going to make sure we reset calculations. So basically, I want to run the macro, this application macro here. I want to reset that. We don't have that yet. We should add that in here. I'll add that in, but screen updating, screen calculations, and all that are important. So let's add that in right now because we're going to be using it often. I thought we added in, but no problem. Sub, let's call this stop calculation. And what we're going to do is application dot screen updating equals false, application, and then we could do dot calculation, and in this case, calculation equals, in this case, we're going to put it to manual, and we can also do enable events. We can do that. Sometimes that's good. Enable events equals false, okay? And then basically we're just going to do the opposite for reset calculations. So we're going to use this sometime throughout the reset calc. Okay, so basically all we're going to do is just do the complete opposite of this. Now make sure that if we have this inside a macro, we cannot stop the calculations without resetting it before the macro ends. So this we're going to change to true. This we're going to change to automatic. So we just clear that equals automatic, and then it's going to change to true. So that way when we run this code, things run a lot faster when we stop code. Okay, so we've got that. I'll save it. We're going to be using that, but as things, we need to speed things up, but right now we'll keep it off. So again, we're going to reset the calculation here because we're going to eventually stop it. So reset calculation and then exit the sub. Exit sub. Okay, so we've got that. We've ensured that we have rooms before moving on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run a loop for room row. I'm putting in lowercase to make sure I have the variable right, equals 9 to last room row, and then next room row. Okay, I got the variable right. Now moving on, what we want to do is we want, inside this loop, what do I want to do? Very, very similar to this. So we can just copy this here because it's very similar to the teacher, right? We're affecting the same cells here. But instead, of course, we're not going to, this is where the teacher comes in, but in this case, we're going to use admin.range AL and the room row, AL and the room row dot value. And it's not teacher name, it's going to be set the room name. Okay, so that's going to be the schedule column here. And then, of course, the last column, again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to set the last column after the loop. And that's it. That's all we need to do for rooms, and that'll help. That's if the review is rooms. What if it's class type? Well, it's going to be very, very similar. So why don't we just copy this all and then update the variables accordingly. So here, and we're going to paste this in. In this case, we're going to set the class type, I think that's the right variable, but just to double check, yes, it's correct. Notice how these got capitalized. Class type is no longer in AL. Class type is located in AN, so we need to update that column, AN on that. So AN here, and as also we want to make sure AN here, and we're going to need to update all of our variables too. Please make sure, forgot an N, you're sure to add all rooms, obviously sure to add, in this case, class types, sure to add class types within the admin screen. Okay, before selecting this view, okay, because we need class types in this specific view. Obviously, this is going to be changed. This is obviously AN. We changed that already. So AL, and of course, let's take a look. I think that's good. We're no longer the room row. We're focused on, again, the last changes to type row, keeping our variables separate here. And then this is going to be type row. Let's see if I got that right. Okay, type row equals to last type row, making the updates on this. And let's take a look, make sure I got that right. I'll fix that variable. Just say type row. I want to make sure everything is consistent. I know it's strange, but I just like things consistent because I'm used to things a certain way. So if you get a user, so I capitalize one. So last type row, okay, schedule column, the columns aren't going to change. Admins A, set type, okay, and then this last column. All right, so that looks really good. Next type row, make sure we have the type row. Okay, so we've got the type row. Everything looks good. So we've added that. I'm going to save our work, run the code to make sure that we don't have any issues, as far as what we've added so far, and then we can move on. So clicking on the schedule here, I click on that day view. Okay, there's no issues with the code, at least probably because we haven't set. But let's go ahead and set that view to change that view. So I'm going to click on the filters here. We can close the details here. I'm going to change it to room, and then we're going to see if that works for us for room. Okay, but actually we need to update a little bit more. Now we've updated this, so that's going to place the headers, which is correct, but we still want to place the classes inside that. So we need to double check that code before we actually run the macro. In other words, we set the headers up here correctly, class type, but now we need to go ahead and check here. I want to double check that the case is room. We want to actually make sure we have that correct because we need to update this. The room is not on C4. The teacher is CF, excuse me. But the room, where's the room located? If we look at our results here, our lesson database, our results are going to come in here all the way over to here. Lesson database. Sliding over here, taking a look all the way over here. So we're focused on now teachers. As we know, teachers are coming CF. The room is going to be located in CH, so we're going to make that update. We just copied and pasted last time. We were running out of time. So rooms are in CH. What about the class type? Where's that class type? That's going to be located right here in CM. So we can make that update as well. CM. Okay, Good. Now, of course, we want to find, we're looking for the class type. We've got the variables, right? I want to set the room variable. That looks good. Okay. But as mentioned before, what I want to do is I want to hide those unused columns. So let's go ahead and write that in there. Hide unused columns. Whether it's rooms, teachers, or types, we do need to hide it. So I'm going to put in there if the schedule, right? I want to make sure, remember, we've got the schedule column is less than 54. That means not everything was used. 54. Then let's go ahead and put this in here. Schedule dot range. And then we're going to put in, where's it located? Schedule here. I want to make sure that we put in dot cells. Let's put that in. Schedule dot cells. What is the first one? We can use row 1. That's fine. And what is the last column? I want to focus on the last column. That's going to be the first part of our range. What about the second part of our range? It's going to be schedule. Again, cells. We need those dynamic. Going to be the, in this case, 1, row 1, and then 54. Why 54? Dot entire column dot hidden equals true. So that's going to hide everything. Okay. So we don't need this. We can just actually get rid of this and if. We can put this on the same line. Okay, so why 54? 54 is our last column. Let's double check that together to make sure. Last possible column right here equals column 54. Okay, so we want to hide everything up to column BB. All right, let's run this macro now and see if we got any issues. Okay, a little bit slow. That's what going to help us. We've got some, and then good. Everything got hidden up to BB. Notice that's what I want. I notice our rooms here. Perfect. That's the way I like it. And then we're going to subject. Let's expand down here so we can see. We're going to get that automatic so we can see. I like that. Okay, room 3. Look, that looks good here. Room, we're going to automatically expand. Room 2. So everything is looking good as far as the rooms. I like the way that looks. And now what we want to do is we can add class type here and refresh that and take a look at that. Please make sure to add class type with the admin screen. Let's take a look at that. We need to update that. I think we didn't. We do have class types, right? But we need to make sure that we fix the code so that doesn't come up. Let's take a look at class types up here. We need to make sure it's just a variable issue. Class type here, if last type row, AN and LX up. And let's take a look, class type. Fix this variable. It should be last type row, not the class type. Last type row. Keith caught that. I know he did. So there we go. All right, let's take a look at that. Reset it, save our work so far, refresh the screen under the schedule here, and now we're going to just click on there, and then let's fix this schedule column 16 room row. Obviously we've got, if we're going to be class type, this is the type row, no longer the room row, so we need to update that. Okay, continuing on. All right, let's double check this here. Let's take a look at this. This is mornings. This looks good. Afternoon column. Take a look at this. Something's wrong. Let's take a look inside our lesson database here. We've got our types here and true. And we have our information. I think it's coming across correctly as far as the results, but I don't think these are correct. Morning, afternoon type. Let's take a look inside our type here. Class type list, our formula. This should be class type, not class list type. Class type. Okay, let's take a look at that formula. I think that's going to work better. We want to index the class types from our classes database. So basically I want to come directly from here. I want to index these class types from our original database here. I want to pull it out from here. We're pulling it out from the wrong place, from class list. Okay, so we've got that. Let's take a look inside. Let's refresh the schedule again, see how that works here back into the schedule. I'm going to bring this schedule all the way over here so we can focus on the lesson database, and then we'll just refresh the day view. Let's take a look. Okay, I think that's going to work fine, right? There are many mornings, which is fine. We got them all mornings. Let's take a look at this, bring it down a little bit. Morning, okay, that's good. I'm just going to bring this over here. Take a look at this one as well. Morning, good. And then this one is afternoon. Perfect. That's the way I like it. Okay, refresh the schedule again. We'll go back to the teacher view, and eventually, as soon as we make a change here, it's going to automatically refresh. We're going to get that done today. Hopefully, I'll do the day view. Okay, looking good. So we've made a lot of progress so far. Now what I want to do is I want to add automatically expand. I want to add icons on here, and I want to actually fill this this information out so that it is accurate here. So when we select a specific specific lesson, I want that information to fill out here. So we want to run a macro on selection of this specific shape here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to add a little shape to be able to expand on that, right? So let's add that shape now, and we'll put it in here next to here, the sample. We'll just put in the sample. So I'm going to insert shapes, and I'll find something that will work properly, something like this. Or we also have, all right, I like this chevron. This should work fine. I'm just going to make it a little bit big, and then I just want to rotate it, and then let's go ahead and align it, and then we'll rotate it probably 90 degrees to the right. That looks good, and I'll square it up here, so I'll make it small, 0.19, and then 0.19, and then I'd like to make it white or something like that, so that at least that you can see it on our dark schedule. So let's actually, it's a little bit big. Why don't we reduce it down to about 0.12? So let's take a look. Then we'll make it white and remove the orders. 0.12, and then we'll make it square because I just want it really small, but enough so that people can see it and use it. So we're going to use this to expand upon it. So I'll go to the shape fill. We'll do a white fill and then no outline on this. Okay, I'll just drop it here so we can see it. So I want to give it a specific name. So we're going to call it expand sample or exp sample. That's the one that'll remain there. And so we're going to use this, duplicate it. I'm going to place that. So basically what I want to do is I want to duplicate it inside VBA. I then want to place it directly at the bottom here, and I want to make sure it's on him. So that way, when users want to expand it, they want to see all the details. Now, this might not be so necessary, but I want to give you the opportunity. In other words, when they click on it, everything's going to show here, which is nice. But it's also nice to click on it here and to expand it. Maybe not inside this because we can see a lot, but in other views like the month view or week view. So it can be really helpful in this, but you may or may not choose to use it, but I want to show you how we can do that. It's very, very simple, just a little code. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to take that little icon and I want to duplicate it every single time we create a lesson, and I want to place it on the lower left part of that lesson shape. So how do we do that? Well, we do that a little bit through VBA. So we're going to go back into that macro that we're going to focus on that day view. And after we create the lesson, here's where we create the lesson, right? So here's where we create it. Here's where we place it. And we set the width, the height, the top left. So after that point, that is the point where I want to add the lesson expander button. So we'll call it add lesson expander button. So the first thing we want to do, of course, with that specific shape is I want to duplicate that. So we have the shape name here called the expander sample here, and then all we want to do is just duplicate that. So again, I'm going to do that. So scheduling, because we're with the focus on the lesson database. So schedule dot shapes, paste in the shape name, dot duplicate. And then I want to assign it a unique name. So what kind of unique name do we have? We're going to base it on the ID. So we're going to do name is going to equal, then we'll do expand lesson button. We'll just call it lesson button. In this case, and lesson ID. We already have that lesson ID inside a specific. Okay, so so now we can focus on it. So, but also what I want to do is I want to make sure now that we have these icons, we need to delete them when the schedule refreshes, right? So if they exist, we need to delete them. So before we move forward with working with this, all the way at the top of this schedule, when we delete so when we refresh this and delete anything else, we need to also delete these new buttons that we're going to be created. So all the way at the top here, notice for each lesson, we're going to, if that contains a lesson shape, we're going to delete it. Now we need to add on to that. So if in string lesson shape dot name, comma, and if it includes this, let's get rid of this, then also delete it also because I want to delete these as well, is greater than 0, then lesson shape dot delete. And I also want to add an on air resume next and on air go to 0 at the bottom of this. So on air go to 0 just in case, and then on air resume next in case there's any issues with the shapes. On air, okay, so that's good. So we're going to delete one more when we add the icon as well. So we'll be adding another line. So now if they're found, so now we can continue. So we want to delete these when we clear the schedule. I don't want to delete everything. So now we can focus on with the specific shape that we just created. So with this specific shape, we're going to do some things with it. I want to place it on the left. Where do I want to place it? So actually we need to add here dot shapes, this specific shape here. So now what we can do, so now we dot left, it'll appear. Dot left is going to be equal to the schedule dot cells Where are we going to place this? I want to place it on the same here. Notice we have it's going to be based right here. Based on this specific left position, but not exactly on the left position. I'm going to move the left position over a little bit to the right, so +2. What does that mean? It means I don't want it exactly on the left edge of this. I want to move it over a little bit to the right. So that's why we're going to be adding 2. So now we've got the left position, but what about the top position? So dot top is going to be equal to also the schedule rows and the schedule column based on the dot top position. But now what I want to do is I want to add it based on the height. So we're going to paste it on the top position plus the height, plus the entire height of this shape. So that means we're going to drop it all the way down and then bring it up a little bit. So we're going to also base it on the top position, on the height of that and the top position, plus, again, the height of this. Not actually, let's remove that. It's going to be based on that. We could base it on the position here, or we could base it on the schedule. So we could do plus the height of that. So let's change this here and then add it to the height. The height of what? The height of this shape right here. This is the shape that I want to base it on, that plus the height of this shape, dot height. That will bring it down. And then, of course, I want to subtract a little bit. So minus, let's say 9. That's going to bring it up. Okay, also we're going to be adding a macro to this, right? So also dot on action, we're going to create a macro next, and that macro is, we're going to call that schedule, and then this is called expand lesson. Macro doesn't exist, so if we run this, it's going to create an error, but we're going to create it right now. Okay, expand lesson. So that's the macro when somebody clicks it that I want to run. So we're going to make sure we have that correctly. Copy that, and now also what we're going to do inside the schedule miscellaneous, we're going to create a macro that's going to run that's going to expand that lesson. So let's save our work, and now we're going to go into the schedule miscellaneous here. We've got show or hide details, show or hide filters. That's all we have right now. So we can put this on top. We don't need it. And then so we're going to have sub schedule expand lesson. Okay, now what we need to do is just simply write the code for that. So for this, what we're going to be doing is we're going to dimension the lesson shape name as a string. I want to know the name of that as string, and also the lesson ID, in this case string is fine, as a string. Okay, we're going to need both of those. So with the schedule, I'm going to focus on the schedule here. And what are we going to do? The lesson ID, how do we know the lesson ID? Well, we know the lesson ID because inside that macro that we just created this specific. Let's go back in here. We know the lesson ID because all we did was we added onto the name of this expander. So now again, if I remove this, all I'm left with is the lesson ID. So we can just copy that. So we know that all we need to do is remove that. So we can use on action to do that. So back into the miscellaneous here. So our lesson ID is going to be equal to replace. We're using the replace. What are we replacing? Application caller. That's the name of the shape that just called it. Well, what's the name of the shape? It's that full name that we assigned, and all we're going to do is subtract that out of it. We're going to replace expense lesson with nothing. What that does is it leaves us with the lesson ID. Lesson ID. Now that we have that lesson ID, I need to check if it's empty. If the lesson ID is equal to empty, then exit the sub. Shouldn't be, but then exit sub. Assuming that it's not empty, then what we can do is we can determine the lesson shape name. What is the lesson shape name? The lesson shape name is going to be equal to the lesson shape. How do we know the name? Well, we created the name. We created it right here. We know it. It's this plus the lesson ID. So all we need to do is just copy this part here and then go back into our macro and say the lesson shape name is equal to the lesson shape and the lesson ID. So now we know the shape because I need to know this shape. If I'm going to expand it automatically based on the text that's inside it, I need to know what shape, lesson shape 178 or whatever it is. So now that we have the information, we can then expand it. So here we've got the name. So then I also want to place that inside B13. I'm going to add some information. So here what I want to know inside B13 is expanded lesson ID because I'm going to shrink it up. So I really need to know, if I'm going to shrink it up, I want to know what the expanded lesson ID. And I'll put that directly in B13. In fact, all the way through B17, I'm just going to give those a color because we're going to be using all that today. And I want to put that inside here. We can actually, let's color that back to the way it was, back to this color. Okay, so I want to put that here, B13, and then when we collapse it, I want to know what we're collapsing and then clear it out. So in the other macro, and when it collapses, and we're going to do it automatically, so it collapses on its own based on a certain number of seconds. So we're going to place that directly in B13. So dot range B13 is going to equal the lesson ID equals the lesson ID. Okay, good. So now we can focus on that expand. Dot shapes, again, application caller. And also what I want to do is that caller, I want to make sure send it to back. What do I mean by that? Notice that we're going to have this placed it here. I'm going to place it here, right? Let's just say we have it here. Then what I want to do is I want to increase this however much it's needed, right? So I want to do two things. I want to place this in the back, and I want to place this in the front. So notice it's in the back of this. I want to place it in the front so that when it expands, it's automatically on top. Basically what I want to do is I want to do something like this. Move to the front so it's automatically on top and the other one's in the bottom. So we can do that with just a few lines of code. So we'll do that right now. So shapes, in this case, application caller, that's the shape that called it, application.caller. I'm going to move that to the back. So how do we move that back? We use Z order, and it's going to be equal to MSO send to the back, send to back. So that's going to send it to the back. Okay, so now we can focus on the lesson shape name, right? So now we could focus with, let's just add a note here called adjust lesson. Okay, so with dot shapes, and what is it? It's the lesson shape name. It's this one right here. We've already defined it in a variable. With shapes, lesson shape name, we're going to do some things with it. Well, what do I want to do? I want to set the shape height. Okay, we have that shape height. We need to put that inside a variable. So let's do that. And as double, we'll put it in here. Dimension shape height as double. So the shape height is going to be equal to the dot height equals dot height of the shape. I want to know the original height. In fact, we can put that if we add that in. Let's put that height as double, but I'm going to put it up here because I'm going to use it for more than one macro. Then I want that to be remembered. So the shape height, we can also place it inside a cell too. So shape height is going to be dot height. So we want to know that. If, okay, so now what I want to do is I want to set the original height. So how do we do that? So we've got the original height. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to automatically expand the shape based on the text that's in there with the single line of code. So here, dot text frame, we're going to use frame 2. We're going to use auto size for that. Auto size is going to be equal to based on the text to fit text. Here, right here, auto shape size to fit the text. That's the one I want to use. That's going to automatically fit it up. It's going to automatically expand it. Now what I want to do is I want to get the expanded height. So let's do that. The expanded height as double as well. So now we know what is the expanded height. I'm going to save that as well. The expanded height is going to be now equal to the dot height because it's just changed, right? It's just changed to expanded. So now what I want to do is if the expanded height is greater than the shape height, because what if it's smaller here? So what if it's smaller? What if let's say our class is like this, right? We don't want to expand it more. There's no need to expand it more, right? It's going to shrink up all the way. I don't want it to shrink, right? So let's say we set an auto expander on and all of a sudden it went to like this. That would not be good because we want the lesson is longer, right? So I want to keep it the same. I want to keep it the same if there's no expansion needed. So we need to check, is it bigger or smaller than the previous? So now we're going to do that. If the expanded height is greater than the shape height, right? Then if the expanded height is greater than the original height, then we're going to reset it. So if the expand height is greater than the shape height, then here we go. Else, we're going to also add an else in here too. Else, okay. Then we're going to reset it. So then the dot height, and I'll show you why, dot height in this case is equal to the shape height. We're going to reset that there. Else, what are we going to do? So let's go ahead and add some notes onto that so we know what this is. So then here in this case, so I know that the expanded height is greater. So what I want to do is I want to create an effect, right? I want to reset it. So basically I know in this case, let's pull this lesson out here and bring it over here so we can see it clearly. Okay, so if the original lesson's here, and I know that the expanded one's going to be about right here. Let's see, it's going to fit in all the text. What I want to do is I want to reset it back to whatever it was. And then I want to give it a nice effect so it slowly comes out. Gives it a nice expanding effect. Okay, so let's do that right now inside. Let's give it that effect. So How do we do that? So we can, first thing what we want to do is we want to do application screen updating equals true. It's going to reset that automatically up. So now what I want to do is actually we'll add another variable in here. So we can do, let's take a look at, let's add another variable here. So dimension, we'll call it height increment. It's going to be, let's say, as long, because we're going to do a for next loop. So the height increment. So after the application is good, for height increment, we can just do any numbers fine, but we'll do 1 to 50. Make sure we close our loop. Next height, let's use lowercase to make sure height increment, make sure we got the numbers right, the variable correct. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is do application dot wait now, because I wanted to wait plus now, and then we'll just add a very small amount, a very split second. So we'll do about, let's say this here, 0.001, Okay, so we've got that now. So now what I'm going to do, at that increment, I'm going to reset the height. The dot height of this shape is going to be equal to the current shape height, whatever it is, shape height, plus I'm going to add onto that the expanded height minus the shape height divided by 50. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to add on a tiny little increment for each one as it expands. Multiply that times the height, and I'll explain that. Okay, so if our current height is smaller, so let's add that in, fix this here, height, okay, and then remove this, okay, so now basically what we're doing is the shape height, we're going to keep increasing the shape height very slightly, but by how much? Well, we're going to take the expanded height, the biggest height, minus the smallest height, right? So the smallest would be the current, the biggest would be with the text. So we're going to subtract. So I want to know the difference. How much is it going to grow, right? How much is it going to grow? We're going to divide that by 50, right? So we know. So let's say it needs to grow 50 points, right? And we're going to divide it by 50, then we're going to get 1. So we multiply that times 0.00. We multiply that times 1 through 50, 2, 3, 4, and it's going to increment all the way up to its maximum height. So that's all we need to do. So then what we want to do is we want to add additional figures. So I want to expand all of that. So that's the dot height. So this is going to increase it, dot height, increase it. But now what do I want to do? Now I want it to set a delay. So, and then that delay, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be, how long do we wait before it shrinks back up? So I want to run another macro that's going to shrink it up, but after a delay, after let's say a 2-second delay. So how we add that in? So application dot on time, and then the time is going to be now plus, we'll do a time value in this, time value. And what is that time value? It's going to be basically, we'll do 0 hours, no minutes, and then the seconds we'll do maybe 2 seconds, so 0, 2. Okay, so what are we going to do at that point? At that point, what I want to do is I want to run a macro. Let's call it schedule, and that macro we're going to build right now. Reset lesson height. Okay, so then again, the last thing what I want to do, I want to bring that to the top. Remember I told you have to bring it to the top. Z order equals, I want to bring it all, not equals, bring it to the front, all the way to the front, bring to the front. That's going to bring that entire thing back to the front. Okay, but we need to write this macro right now, otherwise it's going to cause a bug. So we're going to clear out this and clear out this. We've got 2 end widths, right, with the shape and with the sheet. So that's going to bring it in. So now let's write this macro in that's going to automatically reduce it back to its original height. So sub, and we've pasted that in. And now what we're going to do is with that, it's very easy. We're going to dimension the lesson ID again, because I want that lesson ID dimension, the lesson ID as long. And where are we going to get that lesson ID? We're going to get it from B13, of course. So with the schedule, the lesson ID is going to be equal to dot range B13 dot value. So that's the lesson ID. We need to know that lesson ID because I need to know which specific lesson shape are we going to be reducing. So now dot shapes, lesson shape, again, and the lesson ID dot height is equal to the shape height. And we can do that because we know we've placed this variable outside the shape height. So it's going to be remembered regardless of the macro. And if we place it inside, it would be reset each time, but it's outside. So we have the shape height. We know that original shape height. And also what we want to do is now send information. So it also, we want to send it to the back, right? So now we want to set that shape to the back. So Again, I'm going to copy this here, paste it here. In this case, we're going to focus on the Z order. Now we want to send it back. The Z order is going to be send to back, okay? Send it back because I want those shapes, whether it's an icon or the expander icon, I want that to show above it. Okay, and also we're going to clear B13. We're done with that. So dot range B13, we're clearing the content, dot clear content. That's going to get it ready for the next one. Okay, if there's an issue with that, it could be an issue. So we're also going to add on air resume next here. I generally don't like to add those, early on, but I think in case there's an issue, let's go ahead and save that. And then what we're going to do is refresh our schedule, double check for any issues, and then we'll fix this issue, express lesson ID. Okay, remember we're focused on with, I usually forget, we're focused on with here. Let's go why there's an error here, I'll show you why. All the way up here, we're really focused on the lesson database. So we have to make sure we call out the schedule each and every time. So that's not what we did here. We called it out here, which is correct, but we also need to call it out right here. So paste that in there, calling it out because that doesn't exist. It only exists on the schedule, okay? Reset it, run that here. And then take a look. Okay, so now we've got our expander buttons here. Let's take a look inside, make sure the macro has been assigned, the right macro, schedule, expand lesson. The macro's already been assigned. We'll take a look at that, drop it down here. Cool, and let's wait 2 seconds. All right, that's the way I like it. The only other thing you might want to do is you might want to add that, I like it. So it expands automatically and then reduce it. Notice it's on top and it goes back. Perfect. Okay, that's really cool. The only other thing you might want to add is to reduce it using that, in other words, slide it in and slide it back out, but we didn't do that. It's just easier because we got a lot to cover, but you can do that as well. Okay, great. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and add some icons. I want to put the icon on the lower right. Now, if we remember correctly in the admin screen, we've got a bunch of icons here. So what I want to do is when I resort this list, anytime we add or update it, we're going to resort this list if you remember in a prior training. Well, that's a great opportunity to take these specific icons and copy them over into the scheduling, and we'll just put them here so that they're hidden. So I want a bunch of icons here, and that way they're ready to be used. They're ready to be added to lessons. We don't have to look them up. It would be too long. It would be too slow if we were going to insert each one of these in the sheet, like pulling out of the file name. But if we copy them over to the sheet and keep them hidden, it's really fast if we want to recreate them. So let's do that. Let's go into the admin and then add those in. So admin, and what we're going to do is we're going to go in right here, miscellaneous, and wherever we've added the icons here, delete sort icons. This is the one, so sort icons. So at some point down here, we're going to simply add those icons to this. So for each icon and shapes, if the icon does not equal shape grid, then we're adding them in. So let's add them in right about here. But what I also want to do is anytime the icons are reset or refreshed, we need to delete them too. So what I mean is I want to make sure that we're actually deleting them. Anytime we're adding them to the schedule, we want to make sure if there's any existing icons here, we would delete any icons first and then update them. So we don't want to make sure to keep adding and adding icons. We need to delete any existing ones that might be there. So let's first do that. Let's inside that macro delete any icons that might be present there so that we can refresh that. So let's add that inside the macro. So the best thing after the sort, so let's take a look at the sort after we're sorting those, which is going to be right about here. So we can add them in. So let's put it remove icons. Let's put any icons from scheduling screen. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, for each, we've added icon shape. So make sure we have icon shape as shape. That's good. We can use that for each icon shape in, and this time it's schedule dot shapes, and then next icon shape. Okay, so we're going to give them a specific name, and then we'll be able to remove them based on that specific name. If in string, okay, we'll call this icon shape dot name, and then we'll give it a specific name, underscore, in this case, icon is greater than 0, then icon shape dot delete. Okay, we're going to delete it if it contains these characters, right? Now keep in mind that I'm going to change the icons in here are not going to contain that. We only want to delete our sample shapes, so we're going to have to name them uniquely. So now that we've deleted any, we can then add them based on that. So after the shape group string, so we're going to group it here, so adding all that. So here what we can do is we're adding the shape group. We can do it down right here, contains icons. So here we can do it. Okay, we can place it right in here, right here. But we're going to increase it. So then we'll add to this if. So then we're going to just do end if. and we can actually add it right in here. So we can remove these additional, and I can put it right here. So basically, anytime we found an icon for each shape in the shape, so this is all the shapes in the admin, if it contains the icon, then we're dealing with specific icons. So for those specific shapes that contain this, we then also, we're grouping them, putting them in a group string. Now I want to add them to the schedule based on this. So we can do this here, called add to scheduling as well. Okay, so how do we do that? So first of all, I want to copy the existing icon shape dot copy. I want to copy that. And then what I want to do is I want to paste it on the schedule dot paste. Then I'm going to give it a specific name with here schedule, right? With the one we just copied over, schedule dot shapes. And how do we know which one it is? Well, it's going to be based on the shapes count, because the last count is going to be the one you just added. Schedule dot shapes dot count. We're using count. That's going to denote exactly which one we just added, right? The count goes up as we add them. So that specific one, first thing I'm going to do is give it a position. We're going to give it a position that's off the screen. It's going to be equal to the schedule, and we'll use dot range A1, right? Make sure it's off the screen inside our admin. Dot left, and I'll do the same thing with the top. Dot top is going to be equal to the schedule dot range A1 dot top. So we'll set the top position as well. And also I want to make sure it's dot visible equals MSO true. We can make sure it's visible so we know. Set to false is okay too. We don't need to do that. Okay, you can also resize them if you want. Okay, so good. We're good to go now. So now we've based them, and now we know they contain the word icon. Notice how it's going to contain this icon here, and we've also deleted it based on this as well. Okay, great. But since this is called icon, let's update this also here. I want to make sure that we're consistent. Icon underscore, the underscores after the icon. So we're adding it to the same place. We're copying it over, and it's going to copy that to the schedule. Let's run it and make sure that those get added, and we'll take a quick look at it and see what it looks like. Okay, so we're just going to run this here, and that's going to run the macro. We'll take a look in the scheduling screen. Now it's add a lot of macros. They're on top. Add a lot of icons. They're on top of each other, which is fine. No problem. They can be anywhere you want. We don't need to see them. Okay, so icon history, perfect. So we have our name. Now all we need to do is, let's say I know that this class has the name of history PNG. All I need to do is look for the specific icon that has icon underscore history and then duplicate that. Now that we've got all the icons here, we're ready to add them when available using whatever is in here. If there's nothing here, there's no icon to be added. So now we're ready to be adding the icons. Okay, so that created, all we had to do is resort the icons, that copy them over into the schedule. Okay, so we're good now. Now we're ready to add these in from our schedule. So I'm going to put them right down here in the lower right part. All right, so let's get that done right now. Back inside the macro, we're going to that debut refresh macro. We just added the lesson expander button. Let's go ahead and add the lesson icon now, of course, if it exists. So add lesson icon. Okay, so the first thing what I want to do is I want to check to see if there's actually an icon. So how do we know that? Well, C18 is going to tell us right here. If C18 is blank, obviously there's nothing we can do, but let's just make sure that there is a value there, and then we can move on. So if scheduling, I always got to schedule dot range C18, making sure that we're C18 dot value does not equal empty, then okay, check for icon, check for icon. Okay, and if. Now that we know that C18 is empty, we want to make sure that there actually is an icon. So we're going to do on and resume next. And we're going to make sure that we have the icon shape. Let's set the icon shape as a shape up here because we're going to need that. So we have lesson shape, and we're going to do icon shape as a shape. Okay, we need that as well. So then we're going to focus on, then going to set that icon shape. Shape is going to be equal what? Shape equal to schedule dot shapes. Okay, and so if we take a look at the name here, icon and then the name. So we're going to do icon underscore and whatever's in C18, whatever is located in C18. So we can just copy that here and then place it right in here and there. So that's the shape name. So we're just going to check to see if it exists on the sheet. If it does, then we can continue. If it doesn't, we can exit the sub. So again, on error, go to 0. Now that we've set the icon shape, if the icon shape is nothing, then go to, and we'll go skip icon, right? There's nothing there, so we can go down here, call this skip icon. We don't need to go because it doesn't exist. So assuming that it does exist, we can then move on. We want to duplicate that. I want to basically this right here, I'm going to duplicate and then create a unique name for it. So we can do that with this guy. Here, icon shape duplicate. We've already set it icon shape dot duplicate. We're duplicating it, and we're going to give it a name. What name are we going to give it to? I'm going to call it a unique name. It's going to be equal to, call this lesson icon and the lesson ID. That is a unique name. So now that we have that, we can work with it. So again, all we need to do is then just copy this and then focus on the width. So width, again, schedule dot shapes, which shape, the one we just created, this one here, can focus, so we can place it on the left or whatever. So with shapes lesson icon, with schedule shapes lesson icon dot left. Where's that left position going to be? It's going to be based on, of course, this right here. We're basing it on our schedule lesson, so we might as well base it, copy this. It's going to be based on our original shape of our lesson, right? It's based on this shape here. This time I'm going to place it in the lower right, so I'm going to base it on the current shape of the current ID. So the left position is equal to here the lesson shape and the left position of that. But I want to place it on the right side, so it's not in the left position. So I want to add something. What are we going to add? We're going to add basically the width of this shape, dot width, the entire width of the shape, minus, let's say, a little bit, right? Because we don't want it all the way on the right. We don't want it beyond that. So we'll subtract, let's say, 16 on that, okay? So that's the left position, And so basically, let me just show you what that is right here. So basically, I'm going to determine what the left position is. If it's exactly on the left, it's going to be here. Then I'm going to determine the entire width of this shape. So if I added the width, it would be all the way over here where this 9 is, right? But I don't want that. I want to subtract, so I want to bring it back over to the left. It's going to place it here on the left side. But now I need to place it based on the vertical position, because that is just only the left position. So that's what it is. So what about the top position? So we're going to focus on the top position. The top position is going to be basically equal to, again, the same thing. We're going to base it on the shape, the existing shape that's located right there, the top position of that shape, again, plus, in this case, the height of it, plus the height of that shape, and then also, again, minus 16, right? So it's above at minus 16 because I don't want it below the shape. So that's going to be the top. And then what I want to do is I want to assign a macro to that, right? I'm going to assign the same macro that I have assigned to this. So although we don't have let's do that now, and then we're going to create that. So basically, I want to assign the same macro to this shape here, and I want to assign the same macro to this. This macro is different, right? So we're going to assign the same macro. It's going to be a macro that we're going to create right now, and we're going to call it schedule lesson select. Schedule lesson select. So let's assign it to both the icon. So both the icon dot on action, we can do dot on action is going to be equal to, and then the macro that we're going to create, right, is called schedule underscore lesson and then select. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. So that's the macro we're going to create. In fact, I'm going to copy this on action, and I'm going to assign this macro to the actual shape. So it's going to be assigned to both the shape and the icon. I'm going to do it down here, right here. This is our original shape. Paste it right here. So on action. So now we have it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this macro. I'm going to make sure that we create a macro with that exact name. Okay, so that's it. So that's all we need to do for that. We're skipping the icon. So that's everything for the macro. And then let's go ahead and create a macro right now for on. So when I select it, I want something to happen. So we're going to go into the schedule miscellaneous here. We have, of course, we've already created our expand lesson. We've created our reset lesson. Right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sub, and this is the macro that what we want to select. So when we want to select this, I want all the information to appear. I want the students to load. I want all the information to appear here, and we're going to go get it ready to possibly be moved. If the user moves it, we're going to do it. So we're going to write that macro right now, but I want to check to make sure that those icons, of course, are appearing properly. So we're just going to click on the day view, and now we see the icons are here. Very nice. They're a little bit big, I think, aren't they? So let's go ahead and just reset the size. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the size from the admin, because remember, they get copied over in the admin. And so we have, they're a little bit big, I would say. So when we go in the admin, we add them, we're going to reset, I'm going to resize them here. I'm just going to highlight them. They're in a group right here. So if let's go unselect that and select that group here, making sure they're in the group, but I want to ungroup them, copy the group, right? And then we'll do is I'll ungroup them, and then I'm going to just highlight these macros here. Let's ungroup it. Thought I did that. Okay, now I'm going to, again, highlight these and make them a little bit smaller. Maybe go do 0.2. That should be fine. Okay, I like that better. And then we're going to regroup them and resort them. I think we can just run the resorting. Again, I'm going to resorting. When I resort those, it's automatically going to take those new sizes and update them accordingly. So all I need to do, again, is just run this resorting macro here, and it's going to do all the hard work for us. So now when we have it on the schedule, they're smaller. Now when I reset this, you're going to see them a little bit smaller inside this. Okay, but we forgot one little item. We also want to make sure we delete the icons, right? They're not appearing here. We got to delete them. So remember, we added them, but we have to delete them. Otherwise, we're going to get duplicates. So here inside the day view here, take a look at this. We've created these lesson icons here, but what I want to do is I want to delete any icon that contains this when we refresh the schedule. Otherwise, they're going to duplicate. So all the way up here, we're deleting everything here. Remember, we're deleting the lesson shape, we're deleting the expand button, and now we need to delete the icon. So again, if in string lesson shape dot name, comma, and then we're going to paste in that here. If that is greater than 0, then we're going to delete that. We can't have duplicate icons with the same name. Then lesson shape delete. Okay, so now when we run it, let's go ahead and run that macro there and update that. Okay, let's try that now. Okay, take a look. Now they're smaller, they're nice. I like just the way. Let's add a little bit. I like this, but I want to make it a little bit more transparent. I'd like to see the lines up in there. So how do we do that? Well, let's take a look at this shape, our original shape, format that. I'm going to focus on the fill, right? I'm going to focus on more fill colors, and I'm going to take it to about 10% transparency. Click OK. And now what that's going to do is when I refresh the schedule there, it's going to make them all slightly, it's kind of hard to see, but now you can see, you kind of see the lines behind it. I kind of like that. Now we've got the icons here, the math icons. Everything looks good here. And we click on it. Now there's a macro that's signed. That macro doesn't do anything, right, because we haven't created it, but now you see it's a macro. Okay, I like that there. We still have the expand. That's going to bring it to the top and automatically shrinks it. All right, notice we've got a duplicate icon there. That's okay because it's going to automatically refresh. Let's check that out. Making sure that we're deleting this, and we want to make sure that we're deleting it. We got a duplicate there. We got to fix that. All right, that was just a sample that got duplicated, but I think we're good now. It's doing just fine now. Okay, good. I like that. That looks good. Okay, let's refresh the day view, making sure we're good to go on that. And we got no duplicate icon there. Okay, so let's get into, so when I select it, now what I want to do is I want to load all this information in here. So let's create a macro that's going to do just that. That's going to be called the selection. And that one we just created the macro, but we haven't added anything into that. So into the schedule miscellaneous, and this is the macro we're going to focus on, lesson select. There's going to be a lot of things going on in this macro. Okay, on this selected lesson, I want to track some specific information based on the one we selected. So we're going to track the information. I'm going to keep it down here. First thing here, I want the selected teacher ID, selected teacher ID. I also want the expanded lesson. I also want the selected left position, the current left position of that lesson. So the selected left, let's call this lesson left position. I also want to know the top positions, the selected lesson top position. That's important because I want to know if we're going to move it up or down. I need to know what the original one. And I also want to know the lesson height, selected lesson height, because if we bring it up or down, if we increase it, I want to know that too, so we can and I want to know if there's a lesson change. If the user has made a change to that lesson, I want to know in a Boolean true or false, so we can keep that false. So all of that information is going to stay here. So all we need to do is when we select a lesson, all we need to do is use VBA to place that information inside these cells. So that's part of the macro here. So let's continue on with this macro, or start it at least. So first of all, we need to mention some variables as always. Lesson database row. I need to know that if I'm extracting information and comparing with the database, I need to know that. So as long. So we're going to need that. And I also want to know the last enroll row. We're going to get into that in a little bit. So as long. And also the last result row. The last, because we're loading students. Result row. So if we know, if we're loading all the students that have enrolled, we need to run an advanced filter based on the as long. Also, I want to know the dimension, the lesson ID as a string, and also the shape name, lesson shape name as a string, and also the lesson shape as a string. So just the lesson shapes, and actually lesson shapes, lesson, because there's multiple shapes as string, because I'm going to want to group them. I'm going to group that icon. I'm going to group that expander and I'm going to group the shape all together. So we're going to need that. Also, I wanted to mention the icon shape as a shape, the entire shape as a shape. And also I want to, again, group them. So lesson group as a shape also. And if we're going to be grouping them, we need to create an array based on the items inside that group. So dimension the shape array as a string, okay, as well. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's it. So first thing what I want to do is I want to know, how do we know which one we select? So we're going to use application caller. So it's going to either be lesson shape, or it's going to be, remember we have two, or it's going to be the icon, lesson icon. So that's going to help us know, as long as we understand. So it's going to help us know what shape actually called it. So we can do that. Let's continue on here. So let's figure out what the name is that called it. Okay, so let's make sure that we have something that's selected. So on error, resume next. Lesson shape, because if we create an error if we try to run this macro using application caller, name equals application caller. Again, that is the name of the shape that called it. If I try to run this macro, right, without selecting something, just by using F5 or clicking here, it's going to create an error because nothing's selected. So that's why we can catch those errors. So again, on error, go to 0. Now, if the lesson shape name equals empty, or then exit sub, right? Just in case, it helps catch errors. Okay, so now that we've caught it and make sure that lesson does contain a name, so I want to extract the lesson ID. But remember, the lesson ID is going to be either based on this shape here, lesson icon 1, or it's going to be based on lesson shape 1. So what I want to know is if that string contains those. If, again, let's do in string. And of course, we're going to do the lesson shape name. And what are we looking for? I'm going to look for lesson shape, right? If it's lesson shape, then I'm going to extract it. If it contains lesson shape, because we have two different names that theoretically could run the same macro. But what I want to do is I really want to extract that ID. How do I get the ID either 1 from lesson shape, or how do I get the ID from icon 1? Well, all I need to do is actually simply, I could probably make them the same. I could probably remove it, but they're different strings. Notice that lesson shape has a different number of strings than lesson. So another way to do that is just determine which one contains which. So we can do that with an if statement. So if lesson shape, in this case, in string does not equal 0, then we know it's lesson shape. Then, okay, we can do this and if, and we can put an else in there. Else. Okay, so then we know it's the shape. Then we can do the lesson ID is going to be equal to, all we need to do is use the replace again in this case. So we're going to do replace. We can use lesson shape name. And what are we going to replace? We're going to replace this string right here, lesson shape here, this string right here, lesson shape. We're going to replace it with nothing. Otherwise, though, it's going to be based on the icon, right? So otherwise, we need to remove the words icon. So the lesson ID, paste this in here. All I need to do is remove this here. In this case, we're going to be removing lesson icon. So we copy that portion here, and then we would just place that in there. Okay, so this time it's lesson icon. So that way, we can extract the ID regardless of what the user selected. So now we're going to determine lesson ID based on the shape that was selected. Now that we've extracted it, we can move on. Okay, so we got the lesson ID. We're going to focus on the with schedule. So with schedule, on this schedule, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that put the lesson ID, whatever we selected, that's going to go inside B10. Remember, as we change this lesson ID, everything else is going to change here. All that data and information is going to change here. So we want to make sure that B10 takes on that lesson ID. So I'm going to do that right here. So dot range B10 dot value equals the lesson ID. Place the lesson ID. Okay, next up, I want to make sure that we have a row, right? Without that database row, it's going to create a problem. Just in case, we need to make sure that B11 contains a value. If it doesn't, then we can't load it in. There's no database row. So if dot range B11 value equals, let's just say double quotes here, then let the user know, message box, please select on a correct lesson, exit sub. Nothing we can do unless we have a proper database row. Once we have it, we can then assign that. So how do we do that? The lesson database row is going to be equal to B11. So we set that up. So we've already got it here. So we're going to copy that over. But also I want to remember, I want to differentiate when we select a lesson. I want to set a lesson load to true or not. We have that here, load lesson in B2. So I'm going to set that to true. It's going to come helpful later. And then before the macro ends, we're going to set it back to false. So we can do that right now. So dot range B2.value equals true. And we're going to set lesson load to true. And why do we want to do that? And I'll explain that in just a moment. So, okay, now we're going to set it back to false. Also, when we have to make sure, we want to make sure that we're going to set it back to false, and then change it to false. Now we can write our macro within that. That way we don't forget to do it at the end. Okay, so now we can write it. And the reason is, let's say we make a change here, or we make a change here, or make a change here. I want those changes to be saved inside the database. However, when I load a class, when I select here and I actually load a class, those are also changes made to these cells. But these changes, I don't want to actually change the database. So there's two different types of changes, one by VBA when we select, and the other one simply with the user manually. So I need to differentiate between those two types of changes. Now we can use disable events, which will help, but this really zeroes down on exactly the type of change we're making. So B2 is going to go from true and then back to false. Okay, so now that we have that, we can then focus on our clearing the contents of the existing lesson details. I need to clear all this information out. So L2 through N4, I want to clear out in case there's any previous information, and then everything else. So let's do that too. So dot range L2 through N2, and then we can bring this up, and then we can see a little bit more, and then we can bring the code down a little bit, and then we can see them both at the same time. So L2 not value, but clear contents, and also some other cells as well, not just L2 through N2. So we also have M5 through N6, M5 through N6, because they're merged cells, so M5 through N6. I want to clear that out. And also, we also have to do all the students. The students are located from K through N, and also we have that, so K through N. So K, it would be 8 and 102, K8 through N102. We're going to clear all the contents out. Let's say clear all lesson and student details. So that we're getting it ready to put in the new ones. Okay, so now that we have, so first thing what we want to do is we know that the lesson database, so basically I want to load the name. Where's the date that's going to come into? I want to load that into L2. So where's it going to come from in our lesson database? We know that it's located here in column B, right? Column B is going to be our lesson date. So we have the database row. We've already defined that here. So now we need to do just add it in. So dot range L2 is going to be equal to the lessons database dot range B and the lesson database row, lesson database row. We also have information on the screen itself so we can use that to value, and that's called the start date lesson, or let's call it lesson date. So now that we have that inside L2, we place on that. We want to also place the room, the start time, and the duration. Now, a lot of that is already located in here. We can already place it. We have it here. Once we've placed that lesson ID directly here, all of the data is going to be filled in. We have that data, and it's going to all be right here inside here. So we can just add it using that. So we can use this detail as well. So let's add that in based on that. So what about L3? That's the room. So dot range L3. It's going to be taking care of the room. So where's that room going to be located? That room is located on, let's take a look, scrolling down here a little bit. That room is located on a C13. So we can just use that, and then we'll just copy and paste it. It'll be a little bit quicker on here. So equals dot range C13. That's the room. Okay, so we've got the room available now. And now what else do we need? I want the start time, duration, and the teacher. So let's copy this, and we can just then make the modifications. It's going to be a little bit quicker. So, of course, our start time is going to be located in M3. So we'll put that down here, and don't forget the M. Don't forget the dot at the bottom. And this is our start time. And we also have our duration. So we're going to need that duration. And that's going to be located in N3. So we're going to put that in N3. And then we want the teacher. The teacher is going to be, and I'll update the data in just a moment. Our teacher is going to be located in L4. And then we'll put that in here. Teacher. And also we want to put the start time and the end time. That's going to come from the database, right? So the database we have here. So I'm going to copy this. So now what I want to do is I also want to put in the start time. Remember we added those columns here, lesson database, start time in L and M. That's where our teacher start and end times are going to come from. So we need that as well to place directly inside here and here. So we've got this zoomed out. Let's zoom it in a little bit so you can see it's a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now we can see it a little bit better. Okay, so we want to place it in, of course, M4 and N4. That's where our teacher start and end times are going to come. So let's place that here. In this case, it's going to be M4, and then another one is going to be an N4. So N4 here, place that in here, N4. And it's coming directly from, not obviously not B, but again, just to review, we're going back into the lesson database. They're going to come directly from columns L and M. So we're going to place them respectively here, L and then M. Okay, again, let's put in the teacher start time and then the teacher end time. And then all we need to do is load in the student. So now we got all the teacher start time, and also we ready to load in. So let's put a comment here, load in enrolled students. And how do we know which students are enrolled? Well, they're located in our enrolled student database here. So we have them also here. So we can focus on that. So let's do that right now. So with enrolled student database, okay, so we've got that, and now what I want to do is going to add in. So the best thing we do is determine the last enrolled day. Remember, we have that up here as a variable. We've already variable last enrolled row right here, so we can do that. So let's do enrolled. I like that better. Okay, so a little bit more clear. So last enroll row equal to, and then of course dot range, and then we'll use A. Let's use XLF. Column A is fine. Okay, so that's going to be our last enrolled row. And we're going to run an advanced filter based on what? Based on the lesson, based on that lesson ID or the class ID. Last enrolled row. So where's that advanced filter? We're going to make sure that we have data. If the last enrolled row is less than 3, then actually go to no students. We'll just go to no student. Okay, skip the student. So we'll just put down here no student, and then we can continue on. So if we have students, we're going to run an advanced filter. Now I'm going to base that on a specific criteria. So let's take a look inside here. So I want to know, this is already on classes, right? But I don't want the classes. So we need another criteria. So let's add that in. We'll call this schedule criteria. And we're going to base it, of course, on the class ID. Now we want to make sure that it's going to be exactly the same as our data. So I'm going to paste that in here just to make absolutely sure. And what do I want that? It's going to be equal to whatever the class ID is located on the scheduling. So I'm going to do equals. I'm going to make sure that in B7 here is the class ID. So in this case, it's going to be on there. Here is our criteria here. That's our specific criteria that we're going to use for this. So we can give it a color here and then center so we know. But what about, where do we want our results to show? All I really need is the results, and I only need two things really. I want the row. So we can put it here, the row, our results are going to go here, results. So I want the row because that's going to help us later on if we have to make updates. And I also want the specific student name. So student name, again, copying it over to make sure we get the headers right, pasting it here, and then merging it down to this. Then we can give those colors a little bit color too. Okay, so bring that. So that's what I want. I want the student name to show up here. And our results, all we need is a criteria based on that class, all the students enrolled in that specific class. So our criteria is going to come here. Our main data is going to be in A2 through F. So let's write that up, that advanced filter right now. So I'm going to use auto hotkey for that. And that's going to help me type it out a lot quicker. So we're going to focus on, again, this is not last row. It's going to be called the last enrolled row. So I'm going to update this variable right here. And then also want A2, which is correct, but we're going to go all the way to F. Then what I want is our criteria is going to be based on a single. It's going to be Q2 through Q3. That's our criteria. All the enrolled students based on that. Now what I want to do is our results are going to come into R2 through S2. So I'm going to change this from R2 through S2. Now we have the last result row. Checking our variable that we created up here, we want to make sure it's last result row. This is the one we're going to work on here. So coming down here inside our students, we want the last results row is going to be equal to, in this case, not column A, it's going to be based on row R of our enrolled database. So R. So now that we have our last results, we want to make sure that there are enrolled students. So if the last result row is less than 3, then go to no students. Then go to, again, no student. That means there's no enrolled students in that specific class. Assuming that there are, that's not right, not students. See, that's why we underline. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So now, assuming that there are, what I want to do is just simply copy and paste those students and bring them into the main. Now, I'd like to point out that those names are going to start here inside our scheduling, located right here on row 8, and yet they started in row 3, so we need to compensate for that. So we can bring in those students now. Okay, now that's all good, but consider this. What if we change a student name? If we change a student name, it could be a real problem because we have fixed names inside our role student database, but we also have the student ID. So what if we do this? What if we take a formula and we place it up here, and then we use that formula, we use that formula, take the row, only have the results row. We pull in use a formula to get the student name, not from here, but the student database, because the student database is where we have everything. So we can do that with a formula. And that means basically, so I'm going to take the row here, which is going to be helpful. We can also use the student ID here too, bringing in the student ID. So let's do that. Let's extract the student name. It's a bit, in case this name changes in the student, the student ID will never change. So what we'll do is we're going to change this. I'm going to paste in the values here. That's going to get us the student ID. Then what we can do is only have our results come through R. So we're going to modify that. Much better, only have those results into R, and then use the formula to extract the student name from the student ID. So we have the student ID list here. We have the student name. Now that student name is going to be dynamic because if it changes, it's going to be based on the student. So we look in our student database and we know we have our student full name. So that means anytime they change a specific student name, it's automatically, we're going to look up the student ID, find out what row it is, extract that student name directly from here, and we can do that. So we do that with a formula. So let's do that right now. So inside our lessons database, or class database, we can do that enrolled student database. Let's pull it off now. So let's do a formula, because I think that's going to be equal. So first of all, we're going to start out with equals if error, in case there's no error. So all I want to do is index. What am I indexing? I'm indexing the student names, and I'm going to be based on the student ID. Now, where are we going to find that student ID? So we're going to find that student ID based on the row number. So all we need to do is match. What are we matching? I'm going to look up the student ID. That's going to be located right in R, so we can just put it here because it's going to be R as we bring it down, and we're going to match it up based on the student ID. We want an exact match, so we're going to put in 0, and we want an exact column. If there's an error, we want to put in double quotes. Okay, so then when we bring down this formula, for example, if I have student ID, let's say 1 and then 2 and then 3 here, and I copy this formula via VBA and I paste it down here, paste those formulas down here, it's going to bring in those students' name directly from it. And that's exactly what I want with VBA. But don't forget, we want to make sure that we're going to clear out R3 all the way through 5 and S and then down, making sure we clear out any prior results. That's going to be helpful. So let's add that in there. I want to make sure we do that before we do anything else. So let's continue on. I'm going to do dot range R3 through S, and then let's do large number 99, and then dot clear contents. Dot clear content. Clear prior results. Okay, so that formula is never cleared out because it's always going to be in row 1, prior results. Okay, so now that we have the last row, we only have those results coming into R, which is the student ID. The formula is going to bring it down. So all we need to do is dot range, again, S1, that's where our formula is located here, S1 dot copy. We're going to copy that formula, dot copy, and then bring down the formula. Where do we want that formula here? We can bring it down inside S2, S3 through all the way through the last row. So S3 through S, and of course the last results row. Last result row dot paste special, and then paste the formulas. That's what I want to do. Bring in those formulas. Let's bring that in here so you can see it. I'll bring it up here so you can see it up here. Paste special. Okay, paste those formulas. That's what I want to do. Scrolling down here, finding the formulas here. Okay, so we bring it down those formulas. Now we have dynamic names based on the names inside the student database, which is much better for data. We're always going to have an accurate student name. That's why we brought in the student IDs into this database. That's why we bring in the class IDs, so we don't have to use these class names. We don't have to use these students. We can always look to the original data and pull that out using those IDs. Very, very important when working with data, especially dynamic when things can change. So now that we have that, we can bring in the information back into the schedule. What if you wanted to create it without copy and paste? What if you wanted to create it for a single line of code? I can show you a way to do that. Let's say we're going to have this based on this. What if I base it on the first row here? Now we can use a formula to formula transfer to bring it all the way down. So let me show you how we would do that. So in this case, all we need to do is S3 paste. Instead of formula, we're going to use dot formula equals dot formula. We can get rid of all this and do dot formula. So that way we're going to bring in those formulas all the way down. So S3 in the last result row formula equals S1 formula. But remember, we're starting it on the first row. That's going to bring it all the way down. Now we've done it in just a single line of code. So inside the schedule, we're going to bring it in. So all we need is L8 through L. We just inside. So here we do schedule dot range L8 through L and the last result row. Of course, those results start in row 3 plus 5. So we need to compensate for that. Dot value equals dot range, in this case S3 through S and the last result row and the last result row. Bring over students. Okay, I know these lessons are long. In this series, they're going to be long. Generally, I like to make them about an hour, but we've got so much to do. So I'm packing tons and tons of value. I appreciate your patience with these extra long trainings, but there's so much to do, right? I've created a large application, so we got to get it done, and I'm happy to share all these tips and tricks with you if you're happy to stay. Okay, so we're going to bring in all that information from the enrolled student bridge, starting with S3 and all the way down to the last row, bringing them into the schedule. Now that we have our students all loaded up inside there, we can move on with the code. So next up, what I want to do is I want to I want to check to see if a group exists and create it. So now what I want to do is I want to take this icon here, this shape, and this, and I want to group them all together. But I need to know, does the group exist or not? So I want to create it. So now that we've done and we skipped no students, we can continue on. So we're done with the database. So now this is called the end enrolled database. Okay, we're done with that. Now we're back on the schedule. So first of all, check, we'll call this scheduling, check if lesson group exists, if not created. Okay, spell it right, Randy. Okay, continuing on. So on our resume next, if we have that, so first of all, we're going to set the lesson group. We've already defined it as a shape. Equals dot shapes. Remember, we're back on the schedule, back in the with schedule screen now. Lesson, we're going to call it lesson group. And then, of course, and the lesson ID, right? It's based on the lesson ID and the lesson ID. Okay, so if it exists, so we can do on air, go to 0. Now we can just check to see if it exists. If not, lesson group is nothing, then that means it exists. Then it exists. Okay, so we know that it exists. So that's not and nothing cancel each other out, so we know the lesson group exists. So if we know it exists, what do we want to do? Well, I want to skip the lesson group. Then skip, it's called skip lesson group, right? We're just going to go to skip lesson group, go to skip lesson group. I'm going to skip whatever we're about to do, which is going to be grouping. So we're going to down here, we're just going to put it down here. So that's going to skip everything. Now I'm going to put it together here, assuming that it is. So here we go. Now the lesson shapes, I need to group all of the items, those 3 items, the icon, of course, the expander, and the actual shape group into one single group. So to do that, we're going to go lesson shapes is equal to, what is it? The lesson shape and the lesson ID, and what else? And we also want to combine, of course, the expandable lesson item icon. So here, and I'm going to add in a comma because I'm going to separate these by comma. Expense lesson button, right? We have to make sure that those text is the same, and the lesson ID. If you're not sure, right, you want to know, you want to make sure, go into here and find that here. So when we added those shapes here all the way down here, when we added them here, lesson day view here. So we want to make sure expense, right? Copy them from here or copy them from here to make sure, or to copy the icon, right? We're going to need the icon here. So I'm going to copy this one. We use the icon. And so I'm going to go back out of here because we're going to have to add in the icon, but only if it exists. So now we know that the shape and the expanding icon, those are going to exist no matter what. But what we want to do is check for an icon. So how do we know if it exists? So we're going to do, first of all, we're going to do on air resume next, and then we're going to set it up. If not icon shape is nothing, then first we have to set the icon shape. Sorry, forgot to do that. Let's set it up. We'll come back to that in a second. So set here, the icon shape is going to be equal to what? Again, we're going to call it dot shapes. And what is the name here? The name is what I pasted in, lesson icon and the lesson ID. So now we have that, and then on air, go to 0. So we're going to do that, on air, go to 0. Now we can check to see if not icon shape is nothing, then it exists. Then lesson shapes is going to be equal to whatever it currently is, lesson shapes, not shape. Okay, lesson shape, make sure I have that name right. Lesson shapes plus that and whatever exists, and of course this. So lesson ID. So basically we're adding on the icon inside this text string if it only if exists. Only if not, remember, not, nothing cancel each other out, and that means it exists. So that icon exists and we're going to add it in. Now that we have it, now we can put it into an array. So the shape array string here is going to be equal to, I got to split it based on the comma. Okay, so the lesson shape, here's our string, lesson shapes. And what are we splitting it by? We're splitting it by that comma. So we're going to put that in quotation. That's going to split it. Once it's split, we're ready to group it. So how do we group it? With here, again, the dot shapes. You can use the dot range property, dot range. And what is that array? It's that shape array that we just created. Shape array here. Now we can group it. Now, not dot value, but dot group. Now we're ready to group it. Okay, so now that we group it, now it's ready. Now let's just assign a name to it. So dot name, I want to give it a name. And we know the name, right? Because we've checked it here to see if it exists, called lesson group and lesson ID. I'm going to copy that. So the name equals that lesson group and the lesson ID. So once we have it grouped, then I also want to make sure it's placed, move but don't size. So here, dot placement, okay, equals, in this case, we're going to move but don't size. Not so important here as well because those things get sized automatically, but we're good to go. Okay, so now we've grouped them all together and we're ready to go. So we're going to skip lesson grouping here. And okay, now we can move beyond it. Remember, if it's not a group, if it's already been grouped, we're going to go down here. So now either way, it is grouped. Okay, now that we've created the group and we've got it all set up, I want to place the left position, I want to place the top position, I want to place the height of that group, I want to paste it all right in here. But I don't want to use the decimal, I just want to use the integer. I want whole numbers. That's going to make it a little bit easier and less exact and less chance for error. So let's do that right now. Dot range B14. Dot value is going to be equal. That's where our left position is going to equal to. But instead of dot shapes, right, I want to put in the lesson group, of course, and of course we could have given it a name here. So this, we'll just add this in to make sure we got it. Lesson group, lesson ID, right? That shape. So dot left position. Now it's the full left position. But if I add the integer around that, it's going to be set the whole number. So I'm going to do that. So int integer going to get us the whole number, and that's the left position. I'm just going to copy that and update it a little bit for our top position too. So I'm going to copy that here. I'm going to change it to B15. B15 is where our top position is pointed, right? B15 is top and 16 is height. So, because that's going to help us once we allow the user to change the positions of it, we need to map those positions. So this is going to be our top position, and we're going to change it to dot top here. So top position and dot top here. And I also want to know the height. Top, T-O-P. Okay, continuing on. So 16 is going to take on our height. So we have our shape height or group height, either way, shape, height, and then it's going to be the dot height here, also the integer. Okay, so we've got that, and that's going to be in 16. So we've made the update. We've got our height, our left, our top position. Perfect. That's just what I want. And also in B17, I want to set that to false. Remember, we already did that just to check. In B17, I want to make sure that we set it to false. Okay, we have that already because we said it did previously, right? up here. So good, we're good here. B2 equals false. Also B17 equals false. Let's update that. I want to make sure we did that here. Dollar range B17 equals false. What is that? Why is that important? B17 is going to know lesson change, right? When the user moves it, it's going to go to true. We're going to be able to differentiate that on the next macro. So this way we're going to set it initially back to false, basically, because it's the group's been set, everything's been set, there's no changes. So B17 is going to know whether the user made changes or not. User changes, okay? User like drag and drop or lesson or anything like that, or movements. User changes to false. Okay, good. So B2 is also false to lesson load. Okay, that's going to be pretty much it for that macro. We only have one more macro to write, and then I'm going to let you go. Let's save our work. All right, we'll fix any bugs that might appear when we select on it. So that's when we go. Clicking on here, variable not defined, lesson database. I think it's less database. Check, move it to lowercase and see if it comes up. Okay, that's perfect there. Continuing on, again, let's update that. So again, when we make a lot of mistakes like this, all I'm going to do is I'm going to look for this, Control C, find, use Control F, replace it, and then just change it to less database row. That way everything in the current module will be replaced automatically. Replace all, click OK, just two more is found. Okay, continuing on, and then we'll continue on. And then last enroll row, this variable is not defined, so we can update that. The last enroll row here, last en should be n here on our variable here. Continuing on. Okay, and then looking for more. The shape array. Now this array, let's take a look at why this wasn't found here. Maybe there's a misspelling. Usually it is specifically here. So it's based on this shape array, based on this. So lesson shape 1, expense lesson base, and lesson. Notice there's no comma. There's a missing comma between lesson button 1 and lesson icon 1. That missing comma is going to create an issue. So we have to make sure that when we're adding this specific lesson icon, we also add the comma here. Comma. Okay, so let's take a look at that. That's going to be right. If you see, take a look inside here again. Lesson shapes, lesson icon 1, expense, lesson button 1. There must be a comma, but why don't we add it instead of after less icon 1? There's no comma there, not there. Before. It should be before, not after. Before. Okay, I think that's correct. There we go. So that's what we want, that missing comma. Let's reset that, and then we'll try again here. And it looks pretty good. Okay, taking a look at there. Room 1, room 2, this is not correct. We want to make sure we're adding that's not correct on that. So we got to update those. We didn't update that. The data there, let's update that detail there inside here. We didn't finish that yet. We need to update that. Obviously not, there can't all be C13. We just forgot to update that. Start time, where's the start time coming from? The room. Start time is going to come directly from, we have that going to locate it in C6. Our duration is located in C7. So C6 is where our start time is. Duration is located in C7. And then I know Keith is like telling me that already. Teacher is located, where's our teacher located? In C8. And okay, no problem. We always get to these things one way or the other. We get to them. And let's take a look at that. Okay, that looks a lot better. We got the teacher there. We've got room. The room looks good. Lisa Smith, Lewis. All right, that's looking good. Okay, cool. So now what I want to do is I want to automatically, the last macro is to be able to simply drag and drop these changes and bring them over. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this is selected so that the user knows that they can move this around. So in our existing macro, we're going to do just that. We're going to select that. So after all of this information here, we want to then select it. Let's go down to the macro we just created. After B2 equals false, I want to make sure that we've selected a bunch of things here. So all we need to do is, again, do dot shapes. And then what is the name of the shape? It's called lesson group, lesson ID. That's the one we just created. So we can, and I'm just going to select that. So here, dot select, okay, select, and that's going to select it. So basically when we run it now, it's going to select it automatically. See how it's selected? That's what I want. That lets the user know that they can now move it around, okay? So when they move it around, I want it to lock into place and wherever we want, and I want that database to be changed based on where they updated it. So we selected it, but what I want to do now is run another macro directly from here, and that macro is going to continue to look for changes for a specific period of time. So what's the name of that macro? We're going to call this schedule, and it's going to call day view. It's for this specific view. Check for lesson change. And what it's going to do is it's going to continually run for, let's say, a number of seconds or maybe 20 seconds or however long we decide. And it's continually look for those changes. It is this macro that we're going to write now, and it's the macro that the last one we'll be covering today. Sub, and then check for changes. So all this macro is going to do is look for changes. If changes are made, what I want to do is I want to update this lesson database. I want to update this database either with a start time or duration or teacher or room location or anything else. And I want to then add that into and update the schedule accordingly. So let's go ahead and write that macro right now. Okay, so with this specific macro, I need to, of course, dimension some variables as we're going to need it. So dimension the schedule row. We need to know what row that schedule's on as long. And I also want to know the column number too. Column, so the schedule column as long, and also the duration rows. What's the duration? The number of rows, duration rows as long, right? If it's a hour long, it's 4 duration rows. I also want to know the count number. We're running a count. That's going to help us run this for a certain number of seconds or even a minute if you wanted to. Count number as long, and also the lesson database row. If we're going to update that lesson, we need to know the database row that it's located on as long. Okay, so once we have all of that, I want to dimension some strings. So dimension the view by. Is it going to be a view by room, or is it going to be a view by specific teacher, or is it going to be view by the type? So we need to know that as a string because it's going to be different. So why is that important? Because if we're viewing by room and we move it over, I need to change the rooms. If we're viewing by teacher, I need to change the teacher. So I need to know what we're changing it by. Okay, so. And it's only if we're changing by class, we can't change by the class type because that's not, in other words, we can view by the class type here, but we can't. I also need to run the day view on change of this. We need to run this macro to keep that in mind. We need to run the macro. So when I change class type, we can't change the class type because it's based on a specific class. If we want to change the class type, we'd have to go in here and change the class type here because it's for all the lessons associated. So, but at least for teachers and rooms, we can drag and drop those around, no problem. So that's why we got class type. That's why it's important we're defining that. So class type, view by as string. So we know that. We also need some more. We need the lesson ID, in this case as string is fine. Lesson ID is string, no problem. And also the teacher as string, and also need to know the room as a string. Room as string. And also once we have the room, I need to know the class type as a string. Class might not be needed because we're not changing as string, and also the header value, the current value of whatever the header is. Is it a teacher, room, or whatever it is? Header value as string. Okay, so now that we've got all those string, we also want to dimension the shape. Dimension the lesson shape as a shape, and also want to know the lesson start date. Dimension the lesson start as a date, right? Because we want to know what is the date that we're scheduling, and this, excuse me, I want to know what the start time is, but that's going to be a date as well as date. Okay, continuing on, we're also going to need the duration as double, duration as double, and the interval as double, and the schedule interval 10, 15 minutes or whatever, and as a decimal as double. Okay, so now that we have all those variables, we can then write in. So we're going to focus on the schedule, of course. So with the schedule, with scheduling screen, what do we want to do? We want to do a few things. First of all, I want to make sure that we got to have a lesson ID. If we don't have a lesson ID located in B10, there's nothing we can do. We can't update any database. So we need to make sure that B10 actually contains a value. So to make sure that, we just double check. If .range B10 value equals empty, then exit sub. We could put a message box, but I think it's not necessary in this case. Exit sub. Okay, so nothing we can do then. So now continuing on, we want to set the lesson ID into the variable. We know that that's located in B10. So the lesson ID is equal to B10. Lesson ID. Once we have that, we can set the scheduling row. What's that scheduling row? Scheduled row is going to all equal the database row in this case. Lesson database row. Let's put that up here. Lesson, I need that in here. Lesson database row is going to be equal to B11 dot range B11 lesson database row. Right? So here, right, that lesson database row, we need to know that. So if we're going to make an updates to this row, I need to know what row on that database. And that's, of course, located directly here in B11. So we've got that into a variable, and now we can move on. Once we know that, we can then actually add in our specific shape. So the scheduling row is going to be something different. So on air renew, I want to set that shape. So on air resume next here, just in case it doesn't exist. Set the lesson shape equal to dot shapes. We know that it's going to be lesson group. Remember, we've created groups and the lesson ID. So we have that there. Now on air goes there. We want to make sure that we actually have it, that it's correct. So in case it's not found, so we can do that here. If the lesson shape is nothing, then exit sub, just in case it for some reason. Exit on no lesson. Okay, once we check, make sure we have all that, we can move on. We can set our variables. We got a few variables to set. So let's drop it down a line called set variables. And what are those variables? Well, the first thing is we want to know the schedule row variables. We already have the lesson database row, so we've got that. The lesson start, we're going to know the lesson start is going to be equal to, where's it going to be located? Our lesson start's located right here in C6. So we've got that here, because that way we need to know if there's going to be a change. C6 is going to be our lesson start. It's also going to help determine our intervals and our end time too. C6, lesson start time. Now that we have that, we want to do the duration. What's that duration? Is going to be equal to C7. So we can just copy this and then update the range here. Okay, C7, that is going to be our duration, lesson duration. Also want to know what teacher. What is the teacher assigned? And that's going to be located where? Located. And our teacher is going to be located, we got a few different ones. So I want to make sure that we're going to use the database, the linked database, which is going to be here, not necessarily what's in here, because if this is changed by a user. So I'm going to use it here. C8 is going to tell us what teacher is based on the database value. C8, okay? That's teacher name. Okay, once we have our teacher name, I also want to know the room number. Again, room is going to be equal to, that's located room, and in basically our looked up data, it's going to look at right here, room 3. C13 is going to be taking care of that. C13, update the room. Okay, because this is going to help us when we need to update the database. And let's use 1 equal should be sufficient on that. Room, okay, class type. I want to know the class type. And that's going to be equal here in also our C15 is going to be our class type. C15 class type. Okay, continuing on after class type. Again, how many equals do we need? We don't need too many. 1 is good. Okay, so our view by, I want to know our view by, right? We have to set that up because it's going to be a lot of different changes. Our view by is going to be located directly inside here. Here's our view by J11. What is it? Class type, teacher, or whatever. So set it up inside J7. So we're going to change that to J7, and that's going to be our view by. Now we have our view by. I also want to know the schedule. What is the interval, right? What is our schedule interval? Schedule interval is what we set up in the admin screen. Schedule interval is going to be equal. I'm going to make sure I got that variable right. Lowercase interval. And then what I want to do is it's going to be the duration equals duration divided by, and then the schedule interval, and then the interval. So, okay, let me up that up. The schedule interval is going to be equal to, let's use the brackets, our named range that we already have interval based on the admin settings, right? So we've got that. And then what I want to do, now we're ready to set up duration. Duration rows, the number of rows is going to be equal to, here, the duration, right? Let's say it's 1 hour, divided by, it should be rows, not row, duration rows divided by the interval, divided by the schedule interval. What does that mean? How do we calculate that? Well, let's say we have a 1 hour duration. If that 1 hour is divided by 15-minute intervals, we're going to basically get 4 rows. So that's what I want to determine, the number of rows. Now we've got all of our variables and now what we can do is we can simply add in our counter, right? Now we're ready to run the counter. Why do we need a counter? We need a counter because we need to run a delay, and I need to run that delay because we don't know when the user might make the change. So we're going to add a large counter. For count number is going to be equal to 1, and we'll do something like 100,000. So to 100,000. Okay, and then we'll just do next counter. You can increase or decrease that next counter number, always closing those loops. Inside there is where all the actions we're going to find out. Now make sure we do events. And what that's going to do is allow the user to make changes and other things to run while this is running. Do events. Okay, so first of all, I want to check if B17 is true, then end. And that'll come in later. Basically, what that's going to do is once we've made the updates, let's say the user makes a change. At the end of this macro, I'm going to set B17 to true. And that's going to signify to exit out of the loop. We need a way to get out of the loop once changes have been made. And if no changes are made, then it's going to run out the loop. So as soon as changes are made, we want to exit out. So B17 is going to tell us. So we're going to exit out on B17 becoming true. So if .range B17 .value equals true, then end, and ends everything, and no matter what. Okay, so now if it's not, we can continue on. So again, now what I want to do is I want to check, are there changes in the left position? Are there changes in the top position? Or has the user made changes? How do we know? Well, all I need to do is check this shape. If the user makes a change, if he moves it, we know that left position is going to be different. So what I want to do is I want to check the left position of this shape. Is it different than when they set the left position here? If so, then the user has made a change, and I need to record those changes and make sure that the changes are accurate. They didn't drag it up here all the way over here somewhere crazy, right? So I want to check for those changes. So let's check for any of those changes. We're going to check for 3 different types of changes. I'm going to check for a left position change. I'm going to check for a top position change, and I'm also going to check for a shape height position. Did they change the height there? I want to check for that as well. So let's check, and of course we're going to use integer. I'm using whole numbers now. So we're going to check on those right now inside that. So those 3 changes, let's check for the left position first. First of all, I want to make sure if lesson shape is nothing, then end. If lesson shape, just in case it's an issue, is nothing, then end, okay? Just in case there's something happened with our shape or group, it doesn't exist, or they deleted it or something, that can be a problem. Okay, so assuming that it exists, so if the integer, right, I'm using whole numbers here, the lesson shape dot left position, right, we know that left position does not equal, where's our left position located? Our left position located in B14, dot range B14 dot value. So if there's a change, the integer of the left position does not equal B14, or what? Or we need to check for the top, or we need to check for the height. So 14, 15, and 16, we need to check all 3 of those to see if any one of those have been made a change. Or, right, now I'm going to copy and paste this and make the updates. Here, again, in this case, we're going to check for the top. So top position here, dot top, B15. Or what about the height? Or the height. The left position, in this case, the height dot height does not equal what's located in B16. Then there's been a change. Then change made. Okay, so and if. Okay, so we know that there's a change made because the left position is different what's in B14. The top position is possibly what's different in B15. Or the height is possibly different that's in B16. So we know there's been a change to at least one of these. And now we can continue on. Assuming that there's change, I want to take those changes. And first I want to check that they're proper changes. If they're improper, if they've dragged it over here or up, I want to check, are the changes proper? Or if not, then we refresh the schedule. So the first thing what I want to do is make that check to see if the drag and drop. So we're going to write a little note here. If drag, and this prevent drop, is off the schedule, reset day view. Okay, refresh. Okay, we're just going to refresh it and let them know they've messed up big time. No, it's no problem. Just refreshing it. It's easy. So, okay, so how do we know that? Well, first of all, let's check the left position. How do I know if the left position? Well, I think if the left position is less than, I would say, column O, then they've dragged it too far off the schedule. So we can do that by checking that. So let's do that. And we can just do here. So look at, say here, if, let's go, we can just copy this and make it's a little bit quicker. So here we go. If left position, the left position, I guess, would be less, not I guess, I know, then O, in this case, O, it doesn't matter the row, O1 dot left, right? We're looking for the left position. Then they've dragged too far over to the left, right? We know that, right? The left position of that shape is too far, is before the left position of O1 is too far left. Or maybe they've dragged it too high up. Or in this case, the top position is, in this case, not B14. The top position, let's say O3, right? If it's higher than O3, then we know it's too high up. O3 dot top position dot top, then we know it's too far up. Or what? Or maybe it's too high. Or we have other conditions. Or perhaps the left position is maybe beyond that, or the top. Let's look at that. What if they drag it too far over to the right? How would we know? Well, let's take a look. If they drag it beyond BC, it's too far. So if the left position is greater than BC, or let's copy this here, and then we'll paste it again, or checking for this, we'll do underscore so we can see everything down. Or here, the left position is greater here in this case, BC, we'll use column BC1 left, right? Or what about the bottom position? That's probably good enough. So we can say those three are probably good enough, too far off the schedule. So then what do we want to do? We'll just put a note here, too far off schedule. And I also want to make sure that that there's a time on that. If you drag it too low, right, and there's no time here, then it's not good also. So we'll have to check for that as well. So we're checking on either direction, up, down, left, or right, to make sure they're within the schedule. So we can check on that. So let the user know. So we'll say message box. In this case, please make sure to drag and drop the lesson on the existing schedule. Okay, then what we're going to do is I'm going to run the macro that's going to automatically refresh, all right? Dayview, we want to run this macro that's going to refresh everything so that all their changes are not saved. That's a long macro there. So I'm going to copy this. We're going to run this macro. That clears off all there. And then I'm just going to paste it right in here. And then we're going to exit the sub. Nothing else to do. Exit sub. Okay, that means they've gone too far, okay? Okay, so assuming that the changes are on, we're okay. Now what I want to do is I want to set the lesson load to true. We're going to load this information in. I want to set D2 to true, setting the lesson load to true. Because why is that? Because what I want to do is if they've made a change, if they've dragged it, let's say they've dragged it up here to 12 o'clock p.m. I want to change this to 12, but I don't want this type of change to save to the database. I'll save it to the database manually. So we're going to change that 12 o'clock here, and we're going to change it here inside the start time here. So we're going to change it in two locations using VBA. So I want to make sure that let's set it to D2. Let's do this. Lesson, add this in lesson load. We have a schedule load and we have a lesson load. I'm going to add those two because that's kind of important. Putting that in here, put that in blue, this blue color here, and we'll share. So now we have a schedule load and a specific lesson load. Both of those two are here. Actually not there. Here, so I want to add that in. Okay, so now we've got that in. So I'm going to change D2. This will come in handy when we make changes. D2 is going to be set to true. Then it'll set to false. So let's do this here. Dot range D2 dot value equals true. Set lesson load to true. Not schedule load, but lesson load to true. Okay, so continuing on, and now we can actually set up to false way down below after we make all of our updates here. And then way down here, we're going to make that equals false. I'm going to set it back to false. Always want to reverse the actions and then do our code within between. Okay, so now what we want to do is make those considerable updates if they have made any. Okay, once we've set that up, we want to get the updated schedule column and the row. I want to get that. I want to know where did they move it to? What column and what row did they move it to? So let's get that information here. So determine updated schedule column and row. Where did they move it to? Because I need to get that information. Continuing on, let's determine the schedule column. Now I need to know if they dragged it into a time column, I need to update the column here. I want to make sure that the column's an actual column. So I need to differentiate between this column and this column. So let's do that now with just an if-then statement. So if dot cells, we're focused on row 2, so row 2, but what is the column? The column is going to be the lesson shape dot top left cell dot column, right? Dot value equals time. If they put it in the time, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the schedule column is going to equal, again, it's going to be this column here plus 1, right? I want it plus 1. Okay, else it's going to be just that column itself. Else it's going to be this column here. All we need to do, again, I'll just copy and paste this and paste it down here. So basically we're setting the column based on if it's time or not. So we're just adding 1. So that's going to set our schedule column. I know exactly what column they have moved it to. Now we're ready to set the schedule row. The schedule row is going to be equal to the lesson shape dot, in this case, top left cell dot row. Now we know the row that they've moved it to. Okay. if the schedule row, in this case it shouldn't be, is less than 3 just in case, then the schedule row equals 3. Okay, I also want to make sure, that row contains a value, right? I want to make sure that contains a time, right? If they've moved it to a non-time, if I guess the schedule column -1 and the schedule row, if it equals empty, we need to let them know there's no time there. So they've moved it too far down. So let's do that right now. If dot cells schedule row, comma, schedule column dot value equals empty, then they moved it down to a time too far down there, right? There's no time there, so that's a big problem. Then message box, please I guess we can say move lesson to a row with a time. Okay, so now that we have that, what we can do is I want to make sure to set B2 to false, the lesson load, gonna just set it back to false, and we're going to equals false. Okay, in this case, anything else we need to do, D2 is false, and then we're going to exit sub. Okay, they've moved it too far down, so we can't let them do that. So now that we've made sure that we have a good row, we have a good column, we can continue on. So I want to do something else. I want to check for column change. Is it teacher, room, or class type change? I need to know that. So let's write in there. So what do we check for column change? Teacher. All right, we need to know, are we changing the teacher or are we changing the room? Teacher, room, or class. Can't change the class type, but we can change the teacher or room. So how do we do that? Again, checking to make sure that the cells 2, it's not empty. We want to make sure that there actually is a header value here and here and here. So it's going to be our schedule row and header row, our row 2 along with our schedule column. So that's how we can check. We know it's in row 2. So if dot cells row 2, that's our header, and our schedule column dot value equals empty, just in case, we kind of make sure it's not empty. Well, actually, we can do does not equal empty. That's better. Does not equal empty. Then we can continue on. So the header value, what is that header value? It's going to be equal to this value right here, whatever's there. So the header value, put that in a string, header value equals string. Okay, that's going to be, we don't know if it's teacher or room or class yet. So our header value, pretty obvious there. So now that we have our header value for non-empty, we can then add it in. So I'm going to use select case. What is it? We already set our view by. We already know our view by here based on J7 is going to be teacher, room, or class types here. So we can do that. So in this case, we'll use select case. In this case, we're going to use in this view by. We're going to set that as a view by. So case is equal to teacher, then we know we're going to change the teacher. Then what are we going to do? Then I'm going to update the lesson database. I want to update the lesson database based on whatever's located here because we know it's a teacher change. And where's that teacher going to be changed? It's going to be located in column F of our lesson database. So we have to do two things. I want to update that, and I also want to update whatever our teacher is located here in L4. So we're going to do both of those updates because we know it's a teacher type column. So back into our code. In this case, we're going to do lesson database. In this case, range F, and we know our lesson database row here, dot value, making sure I have that. Yep, the value is right. Equals, and where's it going to be equal? It's going to equal right here, our header value equals header value. That's going to change the teacher name. Also, again, I want to place it also in L4. So we have that here, dot range. L4 is going to equal that as well. L4 dot value equals our header value. So we've placed that teacher in both teacher value. Okay, so we placed that teacher in both of those locations. And now what about if the case is room? So again, we can just copy and paste this here and make the updates accordingly. Case is room. Now in case, it's a little bit different if the case, of course, is our class type. Or if the case is class type, we're gonna let them know. We can't change the class type. So change this class type, let them know they can't drag and drop class type. Because it would be have to change for all the classes. Message box. And of course, I'll change the room above. We still need to make that message box. In this case, class types cannot be changed on a per lesson basis because it's per class. It's based on a class, and must be done through editing classes. That's pretty good. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're just going to let them know. So basically after that, we're going to exit the sub. Nothing else we can do. Probably should refresh the schedule if they make that class change, right? So let's go ahead and update. I'm going to copy this. If they try to make a class change, I'm going to automatically refresh the schedule. We won't allow them to do that. Okay, so this is going to be focused on rooms. If they do make a room change, room, the case is room, what database column do we want to update in? I'm going to be updating this one right here, column H. So let's change that inside our code to column H, and we'll change the info. This is going to be called the room or location. And then what I want to do in this case on the schedule itself, it's not going to be L4 that we're going to be updating, but I want to update located in L3. So we change that to L3, and it's going to update that, L3. Okay, good. So we've got that. We've changed the header row. We're good that. Now what I want to do is I want to check. So we've changed on the header. Now we're going to check to see if there's a change in the start time. Okay, put that notes down here. We'll skip a little bit. Check for change in start time. It gets easier now. So if we're going to check here, how do I know the height? We're going to check the height. If I know that they've changed for the start time, we're going to based on B15, right? Sorry, not the height. B15 is going to be located our top position here. So if that top position changed, we know that there's been a change to the start time. So all we need to do is do if, again here, we can use integer less than shape dot top does not equal whatever is in dot range B15, then we know there's been a change. B15 dot value, then we know there's a start change. Let's make sure we add end if there. Okay, then we know it's change in start time. Change in start time. I think I messed up the F. Look, we've got an if here. This is for teacher. This if goes up here, right? And we need to add an end if here. So and if, right? This if is for, let's make that clear, bring this up a little bit. So we say if, of course, if there's been a change here where this is all based on column change for teacher. So we're focused on that. Now we're focused on check for change in start time, right? So we're checking for different things. We'll separate them a little bit. Checking for start time. Okay, so if there's been a change in the top position, we know the user has changed the start time. So we need to make the change for the database for that. So how are we going to do that? Well, we want to make sure that we actually have, we've already checked to make sure that there is a time here. We've checked up here to make sure that we're actually on a time here. So we, in case there's value, if it's empty or O or anything, actually we're going to put O, 0 on that. I think it's 0, the value 0. Why is that? Because we do have something here. It's going to be just 0 in case that. What did we have here? Let's take a look here. It's going to be empty. If there's not time, empty. So we're going to take that off of 0. I'll put the double quotes back on the way I had it, because if it's empty, we move lesson with learner. So we've already made sure that we have that. Now what we can do is we can simply go in and we can update the database on the start time. That lesson database, we're focused on this column D, and I'm also going to update, in this case, we're going to focus on M3. So those are the two things that we need to update if they've made a change to the start time. So we can do that right here. So lesson here, actually we can just copy this here and then just change it. We're going to focus on D. That's where our start time is located. So changing that to D is going to be equal to, how do we know where the time is? Because it's going to be located in O and whatever the row is, whatever the schedule row is. So we can do that here. So equals dot range O. We can use column O because it doesn't change. O's got our times in there, and the schedule row dot value. That's the start time, new start time. But maybe it's not exact. Let's make sure we have it. Yeah, we make sure we have it on our column O. Well, column O, they all have it, but we know column O is going to take, so we can use column O, no problem. Okay, continuing on. So now we've got our updated start time in our database, but we also have to add it onto our scheduling screen. And that's located in column O. So I'm just going to copy and paste this here, and that's located in M3. So dot range M, bring this back down where we were so we can see what we're doing here. And of course, M3 is where our start time is going to go. Then what we need to do is add duration, and then we're done. Okay, M3 dot value equals, again, the O, that's our start time. Start time. So now we've added it to both there, and then we don't need the double equals again. Lots of equals. I like equals today for some reason. Okay, so now we know all we need to do is just add those two if there's a start time. Okay, good. Easy enough. Now we're going to check for change in duration. Check for change in duration. Okay, so how do we know if there's a change in duration? Well, again, we're going to use the height, right? We focused on the left position. We focused on the top. Now we need to see if there's a change in the height. If there's a change in height, we know that there's a change in the duration. So we can add that here. So again, we're going to do this. Just going to copy this and paste that in there and then make the changes accordingly. And then change in duration here. And if. Okay, so it's not going to be the top, all right? We're going to focus on the height. And we're going to focus on B16. B16 is where our height is located right here. So if there's a change from the original height, then we know that we need to make compensation for that and update the database accordingly. So we got to focus on the duration. What is the duration? The new duration is going to be equal to $range O and what? I need to know how big it is, how large it is. Oh, we're going to use that shape and lesson shape dot, in this case, bottom right cell dot row. I need to know the lower row of that, right? So basically I need to know the time. What do I mean by that? So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to determine what I'm going to look for the row. In this case, let's say 915. We've dragged it down there, 915. So I need to subtract 915 from the top row, and we would get 1 hour and 15 minutes. If I know that it's 1 hour and 15 minutes, right, then I divide that by the interval, which is 15 minutes. I know that we need to determine, let's say, 5 or 6 rows on that. So that's how we do it there. So plus one row is going to be 6 rows. So that's how we do it there. In this case, it's 1.5 hours, right? This one would go to 930, so it would be 6. 1.5 hours, of course, at 15-minute intervals would be 6 rows. Okay, so 1 hour and 15 minutes would be 5 rows. So we can determine that based on that. So we need to do the subtraction first, subtracting the time in the bottom meaning here to the top row. So subtracting, in this case, what is the schedule row? Dot range O and the schedule row. We've already determined the schedule row. Okay, so we're going to make that subtraction there. That's how we determine the duration, right? It was 1 hour and 15 minutes. So all we do is subtracting times. In this case, 915 to O would be, of course, and then we're going to add the row accordingly. So now what we can do is we can update it accordingly. So what do we need to update? Well, I need to update the duration, which is in column E. And of course, I need to update our duration here, which is in N3. So we can make those two updates right now. So again, I can copy this here and we can just make the update. So copying it here. And then pasting it. E is where our duration is located. The value in this case is going to be equal to the duration. All we need to do is add in the duration. And also, what about N3? Dot range N3 is going to be equal to the duration, equal to duration. And we made that simple subtraction, okay? So now we know, okay, good. So now we've got everything updated, but I also want to know how many rows have we made it update? So let's do that. Duration rows is equal to, we know the duration, divided by the interval. Remember, if it's 1.5 hours, divided by 15-minute intervals, we're going to get 6 rows. So divided by the schedule interval. Okay, so now that we have that, now we're updated. So now we can set B17 to true. Now let's set it to true. We've just made a change. We know we've got to get that updated. B17, we're going to set that to true. Okay, so scheduling on dot range B17 dot value equals true. Set true. True. Set schedule change to true. Okay, perfect. So now all we need to do is update. I just need to update that shape so that it looks nice, right? I want to basically, what you want to do is instead of moving it to here, what I want to do is I want to snap it basically to the proper location because users won't get it exactly right. So we want to snap it to the right location to make it look nice and professional. So how do we do that? Well, we just focus. It's easy. Now we've determined all the variables, so we're going to focus. So with lesson shape, and then we can do this. Dot left position is going to be equal to, we need to call out the sheet name in this case, schedule, dot cells, schedule row. We know the schedule row, comma, schedule column, dot left position. We know the left position. So we set the left. What about the top position? The top position is going to be very, very similar. We set it to be the top position. Okay, top position. Okay, so what about the height? Dot height. We need to set that up and pin that up to make sure it's correct. Dot height is equal to what? It's going to be based on a range, right? Range from the top cell to the bottom cell. So we know the range. The first one's going to be basically, here's the range for the top left cell. So we know that. based on this specific cell. So that's the first one. But what's the second one? The second one is going to be basically the same, but the rows is going to be plus the duration rows minus 1 plus the duration rows minus 1. That will set it up in the schedule row. And then that's going to be dot height, right? That's the height of the shape. Dot height double, right? Dot height. Okay, double because we have this range and then 2 ranges, right? That's the top and the bottom range. So we're setting the height. Okay, perfect. So that's it. That's all we need to do to set it up. Let's close that out. All right, let's move on. So now that we have that, we've snapped it to the right place, the right height, the right left position, top as well. There's another small annoyance. We know how this loop is running and running and running automatically, right? But what if the user changes sheets? Well, I want to exit this loop if the user changes sheets also. So we can do that something like if the active sheet dot code name does not equal schedule, then of course, then all we need to do is remember, as soon as B17 goes to true, it exits out of the loop, right? Why is that? Because we have it here all the way at the top. If B17 equals true, then N, it's going to exit out of that automatically. So if the user moves sheets, then we can just set B17 to true, exit loop on change of sheets. Okay, that's good too. That's going to help it. So now we're going to set D2 to false, and then I would like to select something else. Let's say L2. So let's select that after they're done. So that's going to unselect everything. So that way they have to select something else if they want to make another change. So let's do dot range, and then we'll check for bugs, and then I'll let you go. L2, of course, if there's bugs, it might take a little longer. Dot select. Okay, now also keep in mind that you want to make sure that we're not selecting anything, although it shouldn't happen. We only want to select if the active code name equals shell. It's going to create equal schedule. Then select. If for some reason this macro runs when this sheet is not selected, it will create an issue. So anytime you select, make sure that you're actually on the actual sheet. Okay, saving our work, very important, writing all that code without saving it. Okay, good. Let's take a look here. All right, I'm sure there'll be a few small issues when we write that much code. It's hard without any bugs, but that's no problem. We'll fix them as we see them. Okay, so we want this thing to run. Okay, let's take a variable not defined, lesson start. Let's see what our actual lesson. Let's update that variable there to lesson start. We want to make sure it's lesson start. Let's take a look at that. And then we'll update that. Continuing on, schedule row. That one's not defined. Schedule row. That one looks good. So let's update the variable here. Schedule here, because I missed there. And then continuing. Usually it's with variables. Schedule row here. Okay, moving on. And schedule row. We missed a lot of variables. That's normal. So every one of them. Every single one of them, and that's good. Schedule row. Okay, variable not defined. Let's update. So again, we'll do find and replace. Find that anywhere it says that and replace it inside the module. Schedule row, replacing all within the module. Okay, one more. We did them all but one. Okay, continuing on here. And then we have, let's say, duration rows. This should be rows, I believe. And then ends up under that way. So we got one more width with the sheet. Thought we had that there, so we'll double check that. Making sure. Okay, continuing on. All right, that looks good. That's it for the bugs, not too much. And so let's take a look. Okay, we're selecting good. That works just fine. Now when we bring it down here to another area, please make sure to drag and drop. Okay, what I'm going to do Control-Alt-Delete and debug that and see where's our issue. So we did drag it, so let's double check. In string, if less than 01, 80, so let's say 855 is less than 01, making sure. The 01 dot left, the shape dot 855, so that's correct. It's more than that, no problem. The top 174, right, by 03 top, that's correct. It looks good, right? And also, or less than the left shape is greater than BC1. Okay, so that's correct here. Okay, we're looking for a top position less than, right? Less than, the top position has to be less than the 03. Okay, so we can reset that, okay? And then now let's refresh the day here, debug that, fix that. Okay, all right, let's take a look at this lesson shape. All right, what we've been doing is we've created all these groups here, but we need to delete these groups. Remember, we delete the shapes, we delete the icons. When the schedule refreshes, we also now, because we've created these groups, we actually need to reset and clear these groups. What group is that? Well, anything that says lesson group, I also want to clear. So I'm going to copy that and go back into our day view refresh and make sure that we also delete that as well, that we need that. So the day view up here all the way at the top, notice we've cleared icons, lesson icons, buttons. Now we need to add in the group. Here, if in string, this can lesson shape dot name, again, comma, this time we're focused on the group because we've added those in. We need to clear those out. Is greater than 0, then lesson shape dot delete. Okay, now we're deleting these, so we want to make sure that we're deleting these. Let's reset that. Okay, good, that looks good. It's cleared out. Let's take a look at that, clicking on one thing, and let's drag it down here to another location, move the lesson with a time. Okay, let's update that. It should already have a time, but maybe we've got the wrong, we've got to add a column. Make sure it's column less than 1. I think we forgot to add that. So how do we do that? Well, let's go ahead and go back into that schedule here, and then what we're going to be doing is inside the schedule miscellaneous here, going down. Remember where we check for that? Right in here, we're checking for the row. Please make sure the lesson row of time, right? Remember the schedule column, but the schedule column, of course, is here. I need to do schedule column here. I just subtract 1. Forgot to do that. Schedule column -1, okay? Because that's where the time would be located, right? So let's try that again here, and then bring it down here. Ooh, I like that. That looks good. Now we said 9:45. Okay, on Lisa Smith, we need to update the teacher. Notice that teacher didn't update. Let's update the teacher, making sure that that teacher gets updated too, but the time did here. And let's stretch it out here. Okay, the class time went to 3:15. Okay, we need to format that. It's not the correct format, so we need to do that. Custom more number formats. We're going to format that as this time here because you want to know the total 3:15, not AM. That's still the wrong format. Time, more number formats. This is the one I want, 13:30. That's the one I want. That's going to show 3 hours and 15 minutes. Okay, let's refresh the schedule again, and we just need to update. The only thing that didn't update was the teacher name. As you see, we've already moved it from John Fred to Lisa Smith, so all we need to do is update that teacher name, and then we're good to go. All right, I think I know the error. Let's take a look in here. Wrong column, CF. Should be column F, right? Right, teacher database F, and then we got to make sure it's on the database row. Teacher full name. It's going to come from F, CF. It's coming from there. Okay, let's take a look at our code. We know our view by is based on here J11. I think that's where our code is here. View by J11. Good job. All right, we're getting there. A few bugs, but nothing major here. Okay, John Fred. Let's update that. Okay, that looks better. Let's take a look at that. Moving it over here. Lisa Smith, bringing it over here to, let's take a look. I know that those icons got kind of messed up. We can reset those here. Of course they will. All right, now it's Lewis Thomas. Okay, let's do view by room, okay? I'm going to click the day view again, setting those up by room. Okay, so now I've got 2 in room 2, so I need to drag them over. I need to bring this over to room 1. Now it changed to room 1. I like that. There we go. Bringing this over here, bringing it over here, different time. Selecting the day view again, everything's automatically very, very cool. All right, this has been a fantastic training. We've shown you how to drag and drop and increase the duration here automatically. We've also added new drag and drop. We could change rooms, change teachers. We've shown you how to select event and how to timer. It's going to be an amazing training. Next week we're going to finish this up and start on the week view. I cannot wait. Thanks so much for joining me. If you do like these trainings, please check out our mentorship. It's just $7 now. So the first 5 weeks, that's nearly 8 hours for just $7. An incredible deal. Go ahead and I'll include the link down below. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.